The school dream of an ordinary guy who was passionate about motorcycles, which suffered ridicule from his friends, subsequently forcing him to build a V8 motorcycle, travel the world on it, and set world drag racing records. He was called the Michigan Madman. He set 3 world records and entered history as the craziest motorcycle racer on the planet. A.J. Potter, whose early career ran parallel to the career of the daredevil showman, traveled around America and participated in various events. During that time period, numerous exhibitions focused on dragsters showcased racers renowned for constructing their own vehicles and undertaking extraordinary risks by performing with them. Potter, like others, was known for building a drag monster using a 220 kg small block Chevy V8 engine that generated 500 horsepower. This powerful engine was installed on a motorcycle frame. It goes without saying that Potter's creation was unprecedented and unmatched at the time. Potter was a self-taught mechanical genius. Usually he walked along the track either for the best time or for the highest speed recorded at the finish that day, aiming to set a new record. AJ did not want to win any prizes, he simply showed up and attracted people to come and observe him. Fans came not only to see how fast he was driving, but also because there was always a chance that it would be the last ride of the Michigan Madman. Extreme vibrations of a huge V8 motorcycle, the sound, constantly slipping rear wheel, which inevitably began to throw the motorcycle from side to side. All this and almost endless burnout until the very finish represented a unique spectacle. At the end of Potter's performances, fans consoled themselves with the fact that this time they almost saw his last ride and will definitely come for a ticket to the next performance of the Madman. Something like the American NASCAR, where viewers are constantly waiting for the next collisions on the track. Elon Jack Potter grew up in Ithaca, Michigan, and loved motorcycles from an early age. A typical rural boy grew up on a farm, laboring with tractor engines, putting together motorcycles and riding them on dirt tracks well before he obtained his initial driver's license. Elon experienced speed for the first time, installing a lawnmower engine on a bicycle. His mother, driving in the car next to him, recorded a speed of 100 kilometers per hour. The intense sensations from riding that motorcycle felt that day will stay with him forever. Once in school, he was drawing a Harley-Davidson motorcycle with a classic V-twin, and during that he began to wonder, will he be able to build a motorcycle with a V8 engine? He told his friends about his idea, to which they just laughed. A banal youth mockery later motivated Potter to embody his idea in reality. This idea came to him when he was 16 years old, and within a year he would build his first V8 motorcycle, which he named Bloody Mary. The motorcycle was equipped with a 4.7-liter Chevy V8 from 1957. And over the years, Elon answered the question of why this engine. Quote, "In fact, it was a simple ignorance. I really didn't know what a Chevy V8 was back then. I only relied on the facts from Kartoff's journals that it was the smallest, lightest and most powerful car engine ever created at that time." Depending on the modification, this engine produced from 185 to 315 horsepower. During the initial test launch, the local police halted the teenager, stating that he has no desire to encounter Bloody Mary on the street again. After that, Potter took the motorcycle to the drag strip, where he suddenly became a local celebrity. The rumor rapidly spread that there is one crazy guy and you simply have to come and see how he rides his motorcycle. Over 3 years, 3 modifications of Bloody Mary were built. In 1961, he'll change the name to a Widowmaker and the engine to the Chevy small block, but with a larger volume. So, until the start of the 70s, Potter slowly installed Chevy V8 engines of growing displacement and concurrently established drag racing world records. The last seventh, with 3 Bloody Mary Widows, had an engine of 5.7 liters or 350 cubic inches in American style and a power of 500 horsepower. Starting with the Bloody Mary, Potter experimented with a homemade clutch from a Harley-Davidson drum brake, which limited his maximum speed to 182 kilometers per hour, but when he was promised to be paid $1 for every kilometer after 160 kilometers per hour or 100 miles per hour, he replaced the clutch with his own direct drive system. This quickly raised his finish speed to 218 kilometers per h or 136 miles per hour. And to receive $36 for each race in the early 1960s, that is very good money. To be specific, it's over $300 per race today, for a self-taught person, a young daredevil, living only by idea. Later he earned $150 per ride. By the way, the rear tire lasted only 3 such races. The direct drive was the only transmission option for his motorcycles. The last Widow was built on the same principle, making it the final one. The power unit of the 7th number also had aluminum Bordix heads, forged pistons, a Vertex magneto, and a Kinsler-Hilborn fuel injection. This thing spun up to 7,500 revolutions per minute. But how did this motorcycle start in races without clutches? To do this, Potter made a special stance so that the rear wheel could spin in the air. Elon maintained revs at limit, and when green light appeared at drag strip, he pushed motorcycle off stand, didn't let go of throttle until finish line. A peculiar rodeo. Later in his interviews, Potter came to the conclusion that it was his youthful maximalism that allowed him to complete this project and perform all over the world even at a fairly serious age. In the end, Potter and his widower H7 visited multiple countries globally, like Canada, England and Australia. He achieved 3 world records, and the final one also granted him the title of fastest motorcycle in the world. Potter's record quarter-mile run lasted for 8.68 seconds, with an exit speed of 276 kilometers per hour. AJ solely worked with what he had, and what he did not have in principle at that particular time. He was a genuine pioneer. He accomplished everything by himself. It was his original idea, his offspring. These honest 500 horsepower, he just sat on them, turned the gas handle to the maximum, and lived through these 400 meters. Every time, every ride.
Here's what happens when an engineer of Formula One, who is also an astrophysicist and a doctor of philosophy, Robin Tully, gets bored. Tul-Aris 800 is the top racing projectile, based on a 2-stroke engine with 185 horsepower at 119 kilograms, a motorcycle with an intimidating power-to-weight ratio and original solutions, built it himself in his house in the late 90s. This is another unique page in the world of two-wheeled engineering, which means that the next 15 minutes will be as informative and educational as possible for you. Robin Tuluie was born and raised in Germany, where his father, who was born in Iran, sold Persian carpets before immigrating to California to grow avocados. In America, Robin has already graduated from the University of California in astrophysics in Berkeley. Then he obtained a doctorate in philosophy, and all this time, he was passionate about motorcycles. This passion was so great that in 1996 he stopped trying to find out how galaxies were created in order to become the chief chassis engineer for Victoria Motorcycles. after he joined Polaris Corp, the leading US snowmobile and ATV manufacturer based in Minnesota. But it was just the start of his engineering career, which led him to a love for two-wheeled vehicles. When exactly does Tuluie manage to become such good friends with motorcycles? For the first time about Robin, as an avid motorcyclist, became known in 1986 when during his studies at Berkeley, he was a member of the San Francisco motorcycle club, the Roadholders, where he was called some German guy on a Norton team. Young Tula hid his involvement in amateur races to prevent his father from discovering his son's hobby and suddenly ending it. Robin was a skilled racer, and his club was proud of him, even when he didn't achieve victory. Soon he will receive a higher education, move to the University of Texas at Austin to obtain a doctorate in philosophy, and continue to participate in races with even more victories. On his old Norton, Robin frequently took prize places and even emerged as the winner in Daytona. After a period of time, Dr. Rob Tuluie will begin constructing his own ultimate sports projectiles in order to participate in and win races. His initial creation was a motorcycle named Tula Eccentric 500, where Tula is a blend of Tula and Honda. With the engine capacity of 500, the CR500 model used the Doctor's prototype as its power unit. And the word eccentric here is not just like that. The Doctor secured the pendulum using an eccentric. This solution enabled the rope to adjust the length of the bike's wheelbase, balancing maneuverability and stability, and also adjusting the angle of inclination of the rear swing arm for better traction of the rear wheel with the track during acceleration. In general, the Tula 500 is a motorcycle with flexible adjustment of many components. 8 years of racing experience has taught Robin that it's tough to achieve the desired outcome on factory motorcycles. Now it's clear that eccentric is a suitable name for this motorcycle in a literary sense too. For example, a homemade adjustable frame that allows you to make changes that affect weight transfer. Thanks to him, Tilda is very sensitive to changes, and such options really help him bring the chassis to perfection. Or a frame made of thin-walled 1.5 mm tubes made of chrome molybdenum steel, which underwent multiple heat treatment to attain maximum rigidity. The fuel tank and seat were constructed using carbon, and it took Tulu a month to accomplish the task. The motorcycle was ready in the winter of '93, and today one can understand how advanced the technology was for that time, especially considering that the motorcycle was built in the basement of a house by a person who was simply passionate about motorcycles at that time. Quite eccentric. But that's not all the amazing facts about Doc's first motorcycle. As I already said, the Eccentric 500 had a 2-stroke single-cylinder engine from the Honda CR500 model, a lightweight piston, a huge 44 mm carburetor, and a cut-in-half racing radiator from the Nissan Isma. More efficient than any motorcycle radiator, allowed to increase the motorcycle's power to 75 horsepower while remaining in a comfortable temperature mode. Tilda 500's weight was 87 kilograms. It is between the dimensions of 125 and 250. Even the front fork for manageability is installed a regular telescopic, as it has a smaller unsprung mass than the gaining popularity in those years inverted. The only drawback of the motorcycle was strong vibration, but Doc was able to adjust the engine in such a way that this vibration bothered him only at idle, in the range where Rock did not intend to use it. On the tops, according to the creator's assurances, the engine was super smooth. We can only wonder if such a motorcycle was functional, and I must say, yes, absolutely. As evidence, Rob Tully participated in the Toldov races in the Clubman Series in 1994 to 1995, winning 10 out of 11 starts. In '95, he raced in the Unlimited Twins class, winning 3 of 5 starts. In the same year, he took his motorcycle to Daytona, winning the Sound of Singles race. While working with Victor and assisting with Doc's initial engineering research, Robin Tulu acquired the nickname Rocket Man due to his enthusiasm for astrophysics and a humorous t-shirt that read, "VR Rocket Scientist." Later, in 1997, during the daytime work already at Polaris, Robin encountered a prototype of a snowmobile engine, which caused his fertile imagination to accelerate to the first cosmic one. During Robin's tenure at Polaris, they were introduced to computer modeling, which also emerged as a branch of study, since individuals fascinated by astrophysics often perceive mathematics as an innate language of the universe. Seeing the opportunity to model, calculate, and test his ideas primarily using the company's computer equipment, Robin became enthusiastic about a new project, Moreover, Rocketman was allowed to use equipment, free from work time, to implement his ideas into reality. Software, 3D printers, and CNC machines. Everything a genius needs for happiness. And also special hydraulic stands that allow testing the chassis of equipment for 24 hours a day, with any loads and simulating absolutely any conditions. For example, to practice 10,000 combinations on the track, the team and the test pilot would have to spend the rest of their lives collecting and processing data. The computer will complete the task in a matter of hours. Tuluie pondered why similar approaches were not being applied to motorcycles. From all this variety, the 185 horsepower Tul-Aris project appeared, where the name again plays with the surname Tuluie and the name Polaris. After all, the snowmobile engine prototype scene became the power unit of the new dock creation. After 3 years and countless hours of hard work, he rolled out the final result of his labors from the basement of his own home in the suburbs of Minneapolis, where he and a small team of assistants created a two-wheeled work of art in 2000. In March of the same year, Robin tests his new motorcycle at Daytona and realizes that even 4 national titles do not allow him to fully unleash the potential of Tul-Aris. To achieve this, he drives of racer Robert Jensen, who initially beat Tul-Aris Robin in regional races and later in national races against the GSX 1000, leading to a victory in Formula USA. But then Robin received an offer he could not refuse: move to the United Kingdom to become the head of the research and development department. The Renault F1 racing team brought their Tul-Aris 800 with them. In 2005, in the first full year after Tuluie joined them, the Renault F1 team dominates Ferrari Speed Stalo. Young Spanish pilot Fernando Alonso attains World Championship title and will duplicate this achievement in the upcoming year. The team's consistent laboratory work and testing on the track under the guidance of Tuluie undoubtedly played a role in achieving this success. And on one of these track tests, Ruben rolled out his racing motorcycle to let his friend have a chance to enjoy a few laps before he goes into the garage for the winter season. The pilot initially observed naturally the extraordinary power of the motorcycle. It was the motorcycle with the fastest acceleration he had ever ridden. More powerful than bikes such as the Britain V1000 and the Grand Prix Honda NSR 500V, and this already indicates a significant difference. 800 cubic centimeter two-stroke parallel twin liquid cooled, could it be otherwise? Almost a liter of explosive high-performance two-stroke power. His base, the Polaris snowmobile engine with a displacement of 700 cc and a 180-degree crankshaft, was carefully modified by Robin. Initially, it was reduced to 752 cc and generated 110 kilowatts to the rear wheel or 123 kilowatts from the crankshaft. Robin slowly raised volume to 792 cc, power to 136.5 kilowatts, equaling 185 horsepower from a small engine, and this is with a motorcycle weight of 119 kilograms. Such power allowed the pilot during the test run to outpace the dragsters based on the Kawasaki ZX-7R that were running parallel to him on the adjacent drag strip, built specifically for maximum acceleration. It must be an incredible feeling. Also noted was the extremely deep and muscular sound of this engine. Perhaps the only downside of such an engine was a sharp power surge after 6,000 revolutions per minute, but as soon as the arrow crossed this mark, Larry became very fast, as well as incredibly stable in speed. All thanks to hours of computer tests and, as a result, the finest tuning of the chassis in which Toulouse excelled the most. Robin Tuluie's expertise in hardware testing for MTS and various computer modeling programs allowed him to develop a truly efficient chassis package that enabled the motorcycle to handle well and decelerate effectively, while his unconventional thinking helped build a unique engine that would fit this motorcycle in size. Weight, concept, and ultimately would surpass any other motorcycle engine of that time. And Tul-Aris is a package that has a professional appearance even though it is small in size, it is not tiny. His wheels are slightly under 138 centimeters apart. The main structure of the chassis consists of aluminum plates that securely support the engine. The chassis forms a small reservoir behind the steering column, which holds nearly 4 liters of fuel. This is combined with a 3.5-liter tank. The rear frame is made of cellular sheets with Kevlar and carbon surfaces, very similar to the modern construction of Formula One cars. The Tuluie transmission was utilized by Ducati, clad in a homemade aluminum and carbon fiber body. The clutch is driven by a gear rack, features of a snowmobile engine. The carburetors are directed forward, and the exhaust system is compactly located under the tail of the motorcycle. The channel radiator lies almost horizontally under the seat. Air is supplied to it through an air duct above the engine. All components fit together so neatly that it seems they were created for each other, without the involvement of a real genius. When comparing, the Tul-Aris, a 20-year-old vehicle, has a power-to-weight ratio better than any civilian or track motorcycle, even to this day. The exception will be only the H2R for obvious reasons, and the difference is not that great. A person in the basement against giant co-ops with hundreds of engineers and whole racing divisions. I have no further comments to make. Unfortunately, you can now only meet Tul-Aris at the Goodwood Speed Festival, where Robin was last seen riding it in the year 2015. Maybe collaborating with giants like Renault and subsequently Mercedes-Benz consumed excessive time and effort from Robin. His brilliant, innovative, one of the best racing motorcycles in history, now it stands in a cozy garage next to the stable on the riverbank in a small village in England. Maybe I will leave the final words to Robin himself, his brain creator, who is most likely still raising his child after all of these years. Why do I believe so? Just recall the number of occasions Michelangelo came back to repair the Sistine Chapel. A pleasant moment in creating this motorcycle was that I met many good people with whom I worked on it, he says. I have made lifelong friends thanks to Tul-Aris, and that's the best thing for me. Victory over Suzuki to win the US Formula race is a good practice to become part of a team that has turned Renault and Mercedes-Benz from constant underperformers in Formula One races into dominant world champions.
Conservatism is highly developed in the two-wheeled world, and anything that disrupts established stereotypes in motorcycle construction is sure to receive a certain amount of attention, as such occurrences are quite rare. And actually, there are a bunch of ways to build a motorcycle that's not like that. Can you redesign the suspension like the Honda Elf, the chassis like the Alligator Gordy, or approach the issue thoroughly and build something like the Ducati Elanor, Neander, or Drysdale engines? The Super 32 Rovesio, built by the tiny Roman manufacturer Nimbo Motorociclette, is exactly that kind of iconoclastic machine. This motorcycle completely overturns the engine design, flipping it upside down because the designer, Daniel Sabatini, firmly believed that he could construct a superior motor by turning it on its head. In inverted engines, where the crankshaft is located above the cylinders, there's nothing new. In piston aircraft, inverted engines were used for the majority of the century. By placing cylinders and heads under crankcase, you can raise attachment point of propeller, achieving advantageous aerodynamic shape for aircraft, better visibility for pilot, and convenience for maintenance. You also significantly shift the center of gravity, which helps in control, for example, with combat aircraft. On two-wheeled, such a power unit has only been installed once before. A flipped inline four-cylinder engine with a displacement of 600 cubic centimeters was built as a prototype by the French company MGC in 1939. He conquered the creepy 666 kilometers of trials with a stroller before he was put on ice. Well, the truth is, history got involved in the mix. The start of World War II put a halt to the project, never to be resumed again. Building an upside-down engine ain't as easy as flipping an existing one. To keep the engine lubricated, a number of modifications are required. All inverted engines must have a dry sump design, where the oil is stored in a separate tank and supplied to key lubrication points. In the key areas of the engine, you gotta have a few oil catch cans to remove the oil without letting it build up. Some old radial engines need to be checked and have the oil drained from the lower cylinders before starting, because the oil seeps through the pistons. Otherwise, you're gonna blow up the engine. So, having an upside-down engine makes sense in an airplane design, but why would you use it in a motorcycle? According to Sabatini, there are two reasons: functional and aesthetic. Motorcycle frames. This tough part is the core of the whole shebang. If you are using a motor as a stressed element, you usually want to attach the chassis directly to the engine. The Sabatini tried to maximize its concept. With the crankcase on top, he used the inherent rigidity of the crankcase and built a minimal frame around it, reducing the weight of the structure. He also wanted to radically shift the center of gravity. Contrary to popular belief, an extremely low center of gravity is not ideal, and today's thought boils down to mass centralization. Daniel thinks that all masses, including motorcyclists, should fit into a small circle. The smaller this circle, the better. An additional positive effect is that the cylinders located at the bottom are better cooled by the airflow. And secondly, aesthetics. Sabatini complained that the classic beauty of an open-air cooled engine has disappeared in favor of closed constructions with liquid cooling. So, the Nimbo engine is designed to possess air cooling and an aesthetically pleasing appearance. This aesthetic aspiration extends to the design of the motorcycle itself. Only a naked roadster can satisfy a dog's desire for classic mechanical beauty with its unusual engine as the central element. For practical reasons, once again, it is lighter and much more comfortable for the driver, not so hot. The advanced engine design with high performance is clearly not the main focus here. In addition to air-oil cooling, the Nimbo engine is an inline 3-cylinder with one, in parentheses, lower camshaft and 2 valves per cylinder. Fuel injection through a large intake chamber with a single throttle body, similar to that of a car engine, instead of separate throttle valves which you usually find in most performance-oriented motorcycle engines. The cylinder heads are not only flipped and facing downwards, but also have an intake exhaust system that differs from the traditional motorcycle design. Intake at front, exhaust at back. The large timing chain cover on left side resembles inverted AGS 7R engine. The goal is not maximum power at high revs, but a wide, useful power range for everyday driving. The engine delivers a massive amount of power in all directions simply because it's huge. During development, 3 engine options were announced. With 1814 cubic centimeters, 160 horsepower, and 165 newton meters of torque, 1925 cc, 200 horsepower, 210 newton meters of torque, 2097 cc engine, 250 horsepower, 255 nanometers torque, Triumph Rocket 3, 2294 cc, about 145 horsepower, over 220 nanometers for reference. But the Triumph weighs 317 kilograms dry, while the Nimbus weighs only 150 kilograms. Wow, that's incredible! You can't deny the visual appeal of the engine design, and it's nice to see someone intentionally creating a beautiful engine. The project started in 2009 and went online in 2010, with photos of a finished engine on a test stand, accompanied by a press release and specifications from Sabatini, which detailed the philosophy and technical data of his new engine, which he named 32 Revisio, 3 cylinders, 2 liters reverse. The crowd was impressed but had a skeptical attitude. Only a few individuals outside the aviation sector were acquainted with inverted engines and questioned their feasibility. Other skeptics claimed that it might work, but it guzzles oil at an unbelievable rate and doesn't offer any advantages over a regular engine. Most individuals questioned the anticipated power and weight attributes, which ultimately proved to be optimistic, if not unbelievable, for an engine that is cooled by air. The criticism disappeared when photos of the complete prototype were shown a few months later. The motorcycle looked menacing, with carbon fiber body elements and a massive engine that dominated the design. Up front was a regular suspension with an upside-down fork at 50mm, and strangely enough, the only brake is Brembo. The rear suspension, a springless air shock absorber, was installed, similar to the Virus and Bimota TC2D, attached to a swing arm with a box-shaped section made of carbon fiber. The frame was made up of 2 steel lattice subframes, bolted to both ends of the crankcase. The main bulk of the frame is basically the engine with the least amount of subframes for seating and steering column. The prototype was photographed in front of the radial air-cooled engine. The critics ultimately quieted down in the month of July in the year 2011 when Nimbo showed up on the Francocorta track for the purpose of testing. A bright and beautiful Italian prototype came to life in the paddock with its unique sound. At full throttle, it made the distinctive mechanical sound of a British 3, but under load it sounded like a low-flying plane. The test driver praised the unusual design, noting excellent handling, wide power range, and absolutely magnificent sound. Based on the looks, the little rascal wasn't just an empty sound. Proof was tearing up the track, attracting curious spectators to the pit lane. The engine dominates the design and seems massive compared to other components. The pendulum is pretty long compared to the rest of the structure and is mounted high in the engine compartment due to the inverted layout. The intermediate shaft star is installed, positioned at knee level due to the gearbox being placed above the engine. The concealed frame and minimalistic appearance contribute to this utterly brutal design, as does the small suspension and seat, which are positioned high above the rear wheel. Some compared him to cafe racers, but what we have here is a badass custom-built street fighter. Despite being on his first trip on the track, Nimbo didn't think of himself as a racing motorcycle. He was designed to be a high-performance street motorcycle that was supposed to be custom-built. At least that's how it was planned in 2011. Ever since then, there have been few updates from the company and their website isn't working. But the official Facebook community hints at speed records and an updated design, which means work is underway. Two prototypes were built from open sources. 1,800 cubic, nicknamed Custer, black prototype made of carbon fiber and Pollux, red example in honor of the Dioscuri twins from Greek mythology. Prototype 002 Pollux was sold for some time at an undisclosed price. After the sale, mass production was supposed to begin. The production version should be equipped with a 1925 cubic centimeter engine. The declared power remains at 200 horsepower and 210 newton meters of torque. Sabatini notes that the two existing prototypes are well built, but over the years, significant changes have been made to the engine design, and the production engine will be greatly improved. There were also plans to develop a racing version for the company on the Isle of Man. According to the latest news, the developers have announced a fundraising campaign on the crowdfunding platform Indiegogo. To establish production, they require 3.2 million euros, and the anticipated bike price is approximately $68,000. The most interesting thing is that in the initial press release, Nimbo is described as the most expensive road motorcycle in the world, and Sabatini confirmed that the production version was supposed to cost around 300,000 euros per unit. Excessively, of course, but keep in mind, you ain't paying for a motorcycle that uses an existing engine. The Nimbo engine is 100% unique, and a high price is necessary to offset the huge costs of designing and building the engine on our own, without the support of major manufacturers. Nimbo is a weird offshoot on the motorcycle evolution tree. The advantage of this design is offset by the additional complexity of designing the engine from scratch. But if Nimbo used the same engine concept in a regular layout, we probably wouldn't be discussing this today, and Super 32 would have become an obscure project. Instead, he captured the imagination of the curious public and pissed off a bunch of critics. According to the press release from Nimbo, their online advertising was all word of mouth and came from various blogs and forums. Nimbo is a kind of technological experiment, which is a refreshing form of entertainment, an exercise in pure engineering creativity, driven by passion and a strong desire to do something different. True innovations in motorcycle design are a rare occurrence, but Sabatini created a machine that really stands out. Consequently, we obtained one of the most exclusive motorcycles globally, featuring a unique concept that completely redefines the traditional design.
Glenn Hammond Curtis, a true pioneer in both aviation and motorcycle manufacturing, one of the main figures of the beginning of the last century. Being absolutely fearless and uncompromising person, he installed an aviation engine of his own design in a reinforced bicycle frame and rode it so fast that his record could not be officially beaten for 23 years. And all this was done over 100 years ago, in a time when trains were the fastest means of transportation. This is the story of the only motorcyclist in the world who holds the title of the absolute speed record. You may know the name Glenn Curtis thanks to his colossal contribution to world aviation, but Glenn was also a pioneer in motorcycle construction, and what kind, but everything in order. Glenn Curtis was born in 1878 in Hammondsport, New York, and at an early age Curtis began to show an interest in speed, participating in and winning bicycle races. He switches to motorcycles in 1902 and founds Curtis Manufacturing Company, which produced motorcycles under the name Hercules, later Marvel, as well as created a successful line of air-cooled engines and competed with brands such as Indian and Harley-Davidson in races which Curtis often won. It was his skill as a builder of lightweight and powerful engines that essentially led Curtis into the aviation industry, where he would later flourish. Curtis got into aviation or aeronautics in 1904 when American aviator Thomas Scott Baldwin procured a Curtis motorcycle engine for the purpose of installing it in his California Aero airship. Later, at the invitation of Alexander Graham Bell, Glenn joined the newly formed Association of Aviation Experiments. And on July 4th, 1908, Curtis won the Scientific American Trophy, achieving the first public flight covering a distance of at least 1 kilometer on an American plane, Junebug. This biplane appeared in newspaper headlines for over a month before Wilbur Wright made his first public flights in France. History had an extraordinary impact on the public and marked the emergence of Curtis as a key figure in aviation. But a year before these events, Curtis managed to do something no less amazing, only on Earth. Returning to motorcycles, the famous Glenn V8 prototype was practically equipped with an aviation engine prototype. Curtis realized that the motorcycle that would determine his future motorcycle career and overshadow all achievements in that field should have a V8 engine. In response to several requests from early aviation experimenters, Curtis developed his first V8 engine, after which he asked his team to build a motorcycle frame strong enough to withstand this engine, and plans to see how fast it can accelerate. I remind you that all this happened over 100 years ago. Individuals are only just starting to explore the airspace, and not a single individual even contemplates land speed records. During that particular time, the most rapid trains on the entire Earth were. No one thinks about it except for Glenn Curtis. His super lightweight for its time V8 had a monstrous volume of 4.4 liters, air cooling, 90-degree cylinder arrangement, and almost square ratio. That is, almost equal diameter and piston stroke. The power of this device reached 40 horsepower. During that era, Harley and Indians were simply bicycles, with engines boasting a 2 horsepower capacity. Massive 4-liter V8, robust steel frame. Oh yeah, there was also a seat. That's all. Neither the gearbox nor the clutch. The drive was simply carried out through a propeller shaft from the crankshaft, because at that time no belt or chain could cope with such power. No exhaust. Imagine how loudly this beast screamed. On January 23, 1907, on Ormond Beach, Florida, Curtis sits on this monster in only a leather suit, glasses, and a hat, because there were no helmets or brakes at that time, and in those days people believed that at such a speed a person simply could not breathe. On that day, Glenn Curtis traveled a 4-kilometer stretch of sand and reached a staggering speed of 218 kilometers per hour. And contrary to popular belief, he did not suffocate. To better understand how fast it was, you need to know that all previous speed records were set by trains, airplanes were just starting to fly, and the previous record of over 100 kilometers per hour also belonged to Curtis on his motorcycle with a V-twin engine. This is still the sole motorcycle globally that maintained the ultimate speed record, indicating there was completely nothing swifter on the planet during that period of time. Just contemplate it. The official motorcycle record of Glenn Curtis will only be surpassed after a span of 23 years by Joseph Wright in the month of August in the year 1930. Serial motorcycles will learn to reach such speed by the early 70s. Glenn Curtis, speaking like an athlete, remained unbeaten. He died in the same 30th year, a month before the new official record. The only issue in this story is that officially this record was not registered, because to fix the record it was necessary to drive in both directions, and in the second race the motorcycle's drive shaft could not withstand and at a speed of 90 km per h simply fell apart. But that didn't stop the newspapers from dubbing Glenn Curtis the fastest man on the planet, and forever etching him into history with the nickname Hell Rider, the Infernal Racer, for his unearthly bravery. Curtis will continue motorcycle production for some time, after which he will finally transition to aviation, where he will make an even stronger contribution, possibly overshadowing his bright motorcycle history. However, his accomplishments still remained as true landmarks from the early, scary and dangerous days of sports.
In the late 60s, the New Zealand phenomenon built a racing motorcycle with his own hands for the prestigious Grand Prix 500 class, using a powerful two-stroke boat engine. He defeated the factory teams of MV Agusta, Yamaha, and their racers, participating in races on his own and fixing his motorcycle with his own hands during the breaks between races. His creation was cutting edge for its time, and his technical solutions would later become a staple of two-stroke engineering. They called him Friendly Kiwi. His name is Kim Newcombe. Kim Newcombe was born in Nelson, New Zealand in '44 and grew up in Auckland, where he met the love of his life, Janine. After marrying, Kim and Janine moved to Australia in '63 to fulfill Kim's passion for motorcycle racing in a better country. Kim was a natural-born racer who possessed an unstoppable passion for motorcycles and demonstrated outstanding talent on dirt tracks, to the surprise of their more experienced opponents. Soon Kim got into water racing, which had a big impact on his life. As a ship engine mechanic in Melbourne in the late 60s, Newcombe first encountered the Konig outboard motor, compact two-stroke engine with a volume of 494 cubic centimeters. Kima was blown away by this simple and powerful engine, and he wanted to meet the person behind its creation. In the year 1968, Kim meets Dieter Konig, who offered Kim a position at his factory located in Germany. So Kim and Janine packed their bags again and set off halfway around the globe. Shortly after beginning work at Konig, Kim was given a captivating chance to merge the Konig engine with a motorbike. German racer Wolf Braun was developing a motorcycle chassis based on the Konig engine, but soon had to give up on the project. Dieter asked Kima to take on the development. Without thinking twice, I fully dedicated myself to this business. But despite Kim's enthusiasm and Braun's experiments, Konig was still a boat engine. Putting him on a motorcycle was no easy feat. It took a ton of work just to get him up and running, let alone winning races. Because the Konig initially lacked a transmission, Kim had to install one. This connected it to the clutches of a 6-speed Norton gearbox in order to ensure proper functioning of the vehicle. To create space for the box, we needed to raise the lengthy engine slightly from the rear, resulting in a unique and unconventional look. Another issue was cooling, because similar to most outboard motors, Konig cools using water in which it is directly positioned. This engine simply wasn't designed for use in other conditions. Through some tinkering, we've come up with a kick-ass radiator and a one-of-a-kind crankcase cooling system. About the quirks of a two-stroke engine, power decreases when the crankcase overheats. Problem cleverly solved, with a tubular magnesium tray with its own water cooling. This skid plate obstructed placing the exhaust underneath, so the cylinders were flipped and the exhaust was directed upwards, next to the intake. This led to a problem with packaging, as the carburetors took up space between the exhaust manifolds. The fully vertical intake holes with downward draft also caused problems, since most motorcycle carburetors had side draft. This required the use of the American Tillotson diaphragm, designed for multi-position use. This was utilized on Harley-Davidsons and snowmobiles, but not in road racing, which indicated restricted tuning potential in comparison to carburetors of other models. Despite the flaws in the already built prototypes, the Konig 500 turned out to be a cutting-edge machine. For that time, it was a kick-ass design, packed with a bunch of innovations that later became the gold standard for two-stroke racing engines. Swing valves are operated by a rotating disc that separates the carburetor from the crankcase opening. The crankshaft rotates the disc, opening and closing the holes and accurately determining the intake time. In Konig, a disc was used, moved by a toothed belt, rotating 90 degrees on the right side of the engine, above the crankcase. The expansion chamber exhaust is essential for properly tuning a two-stroke engine, and Konig was one of the pioneering motorcycles to use massive chambers, which later became a common and widely adopted feature on two-stroke motorcycles in the industry. The objective is to redirect the exhaust gas pulses back, as the intake and exhaust ports on a two-stroke engine are open simultaneously, allowing cross-flow and resulting in inevitable fuel mixture leakage into the exhaust system. The ideal two-stroke mixture occurs when the chamber is filled completely, without turbulence or any unburned mixture leaking through the exhaust ports. Expansion chambers reflect the pulses of the exhaust gas flow back to push the fuel mixture back into the cylinder, thereby increasing pressure. Increased efficiency leads to greater power. In 1969, when the initial prototype was constructed, it was producing 68 horsepower and boasted a number of impressive specifications. Despite its sturdy construction, the engine turned out to be fragile after being adapted for use on a motorcycle. Konig earned a reputation as a fast motorcycle when it didn't blow up and didn't eat gears. To make Konig competitive, substantial enhancements, testing, and adjustments were necessary, which Kim literally carried out spontaneously. In 1970, the power was increased to 75 horsepower, which was a serious feat for a motorcycle weighing just over 113 kilograms. Later versions had a power of about 90 horsepower. Knowing Konig better than anyone else, Kim wanted to fix its flaws and make it reliable. It was inevitable that Kim would become the primary driver. However, Kim was not a racer on the highway, as he did not possess an FIM racing license. He never raced on asphalt, but his performances defied the rules and his feats became legendary, challenging the established norms of the sport. He started racking up victories at an astonishing pace. Rumors about the German-made motorcycle dominating the roads quickly spread. The fans in the area went wild. Kim became a highly regarded racer, rapidly obtaining an FIM license and demonstrating his expertise in road racing as well. And this was on a motorcycle that he actually constructed himself, that he maintained himself and repaired himself. As a greenhorn with no experience, Kim had to work with a tight budget. While participating in the 572 Grand Prix, he worked solo, fixing his motorcycle between races. Despite factory brigade's difficulties with less than ideal funding, Kim achieved noticeable success. He took third place in the grueling Grand Prix of West Germany, held at the Nürburgring, during his first performance on the legendary challenging track. Konig was a real speed demon, able to leave the champion MV Agusta in the dust on the straightaways. Unfortunately, Kim's season was cut short due to the crash at the Dutch Grand Prix, which resulted in him suffering a serious back injury. He secured 10th place at the end of the season, which is an impressive result for a rookie racer who didn't complete a full race schedule. Fully recovered, Kim came back for the 73rd season. He was constantly getting on the podium. After winning the Grand Prix of Yugoslavia, the New Zealand underdog with a Kiwi bird on his helmet became the championship leader in points. An unknown racer who built his own motorcycle based on a boat engine turned the racing world upside down. By the end of the season, Kim and his Konig were invited to a series in Great Britain at the Silverstone track. There were rumours that John Player Norton's team was planning to take on Konig on their home turf, and they offered Kim a pretty good amount for it. The race wasn't anything serious, but she gave Kim the opportunity to earn extra money until the end of the season, and he was just thrilled to be invited.
A 680 cubic version of Konig was prepared, and Konig and Kim crossed La Manche with their family to participate in the event. The day before the race, Kim took a stroll to familiarize himself with the track. He noticed that one specific section of the slope had a dangerous dip right before a sharp turn, surrounded by a wall made of wooden beams. Worried about safety, he reached out to Vernon Cooper, the track manager, with a request to put the hay in front of the wall. Cooper was pissed off. He angrily rejected Kim and threatened to bite him off if he dares to complain again. The next day, on August 11th, Kim was leading the race for 6 laps before making a mistake at the Stowe, flying off the track and crashing into the wall. They took him to the local hospital while he was unconscious. Kim never regained consciousness, and on August 14th his brain was declared dead. He was 29 years old and posthumously placed second in the 1973 500 Grand Prix, defeating Agostini and finishing behind Phil Reed. After Kim's death, Dieter Koenig didn't want anything to do with the damn motorcycle project anymore. He was really freaked out by this event and never pursued it further. Kim Newcombe, an underdog in the Grand Prix races, yet a bold and talented driver who challenged class differences and surprised the world by threatening MV Agusta's dominance with incredible machines, defied expectations and shook the racing world with his remarkable skills. No one expected that a friendly, quiet New Zealander would challenge the racing hierarchy, let alone lead the 500 class world championship, working almost entirely independently and performing at the highest level of sports. Back in the day, he was a legend, gone too soon in the prime of his life, in the most unfortunate circumstances. A fateful accident that he foresaw and tried to prevent. Purebred American superbike. What should he be like? A sleek, longitudinal engine with 3 camshafts and 2 crankshafts, a front fork on linear bearings, an electro-hydraulic slip clutch, and a meticulously designed narrow silhouette of the motorcycle. Actually, his back wheel was broader than his motor. At the very least, it ought to be uncommon and theoretically groundbreaking. And you'll learn about how things turned out in practice in today's unique story. For the overwhelming majority of enthusiasts, dreams of creating something new on 2 wheels still remain ephemeral. But there are such self-taught people who have crazy ideas, energy, and somehow manage to find money for all this. In the early 90s, John Britton and Andrea Cartanza's stardom soared. Recall the ELF projects? Desperados made giants follow, sporty Hondas or Ducatis with single-sided swing arm following ELF de Cartanza's lead, or Benelli Tornado with tail radiators, like John Britton's motorcycles, exemplify their influence. The new century gave us another madman, the 40-year-old American architect Michael Sis. His workshop fulfilled orders for the most prestigious hotels and entertainment centers, and superstars live in the houses he designed. But Michael never forgot about the family hobby, motorcycles. Grandpa Clarence was famous as a tuner of Norden Manx racing motorcycles after World War II. Farterry raced himself, prepped cars for others. Michael, on break from architecture, earned US championship points on a 250cc Aprilia RSV. His passion for bikes was instilled in him from an early age. At around 4, a mini bike named Sears entered his life. Numerous older girls possessed this. Even at such a young age, Michael already had his own perspective on design. I even aesthetically despised him at that time. I desired an actual insect on the top and a genuine seat, he states. Being older, he rode motorcycles before falling in love with his dream of building a truly American, original, patented motorcycle for MotoGP participation, filled with advanced technologies. It would seem like an impossible task for a person without an engineering background, but you will be greatly surprised when you find out who created Michael's mind. MotoCzysz, Michael's company, started, as caricatured as it may sound, in his own garage. The motorbike was designed and built, except for the fairings, for an extended period of time right there.
And the computer's here, and the C1 was here. The engine was built on that desk, the mule engine set in the corner, and we had a drill press and a milling machine and just a few items.
Seeing his son's intention to create the most unusual motorcycle, a racing motorcycle, Michael's father joined the team as the chief engineer. Knowing all the dangers of this sport, Terry wanted to protect her son. Together they assembled a team of excellent engineers and moved from their own garage to headquarters in Portland. They start implementing Caesar Jr.'s brilliant ideas. Michael has received over 30 patents for his project, and now it's time to see where his fanaticism has taken him. The basis is an inline 4-cylinder engine with longitudinal arrangement, naturally with liquid cooling, but it is only formally inline. The PPE itself refers to it as Z-shaped, as the cylinders in this engine are arranged in a zigzag, or more simply, in a chess order. Just like on the Fulvia V4 or the more well-known variant from the Volkswagen Group, the VR6 engine. Furthermore, PPE Prototype has 15-degree cylinder misalignment with German, but similarities end there, from top to bottom in order. To begin with, Michael's engine has 3 camshafts because the throttle intake passes between them in an unusual way, which makes the cylinder head slightly wider, similar to VR6. But it is not 4 camshafts like on V-Shape 60, 90-degree 4s, which is a direct weight saving and a very simple solution. Timing belt drive gear, as well as the block, no longer looked solid but like 2 connected parallel twines. Michael asserted that this cylinder arrangement enhanced engine cooling. Moving down, we encounter a crankshaft divided in half. 2 of its halves rotate in opposite directions, thereby being the main feature, neutralizing the gyroscopic effect of the engine. The main focus was on this during the tech presentation, and it worked, but more on that later. The leading gear on the right crankshaft is smaller than on the left one because its power must pass through an intermediate shaft to change its direction before both crankshafts transmit torque to the gearbox. The 6-speed transmission is located directly under the engine and is an easily removable unit for quick gear ratio changes necessary for racing. It took about 10 minutes, not hours. He was equipped with the world's first slipping hydroelectric clutch. The element was controlled by electronics and activated by hydraulics. It was located directly in the airflow, providing improved cooling. The Z-shaped engine of the Sizo was compact, just 16.5 centimeters wide, enabling a larger motorcycle than competitors, yet free from gyroscopic forces, providing a unique advantage. Engine parts made by Cosworth. To achieve narrow silhouette from front, 2 small radiators installed, main third one located under seat, this one produced by well-known company Cosworth. And also a rather interesting moment. The hypothesis was that a small frontal area signifies a higher and maximum velocity for a given output power. With increased speed, high pressure air is directed to the back of the bike and the radiator. A smaller aerodynamic bag behind the motorcycle, enabling effective overtaking on straightaways with a slim silhouette compensating for power deficit due to sudden regulations, for example. The rear wheel was wider than the engine. It may seem like science fiction, but this prototype is not unique solely because of the engine's size. Instead of the typical inverted fork, the so-called 6X-Flex system is installed here. It seems like you're holding the front wheel axle straight with your hands. Feel the slightest inclination of the wheel, the tire grip, and the limits of sliding in a high-speed turn. The merit of linear bearings, greatly reducing friction and thereby increasing fork sensitivity. You can brake very late with her when entering a turn, and press the brake lever with all your might while passing the corner. This solution has a positive impact on the speed of its replacement. Finally, with this solution there is no such concept as cavitation of damping oil. The lower part of the system is designed in such a way as to provide maximum rigidity in the vertical and horizontal directions, but at the same time have elasticity in the lateral directions in order to absorb shocks during turns. The rear aluminum swing arm was welded from 6 parts initially. At that point there were already 2 damping elements. Reverse. This solution aided in fine-tuning the rear suspension more accurately. The frame, fairings, wheels, tank, and in final versions, swing arm, were all made of carbon. After a series of failures that haunted the team throughout the development process, which is normal for such practice, in the end, in 2006, the engine came to life. Having assembled the motorcycle completely, MotoCzysz immediately proceeded to the tests. Michael and his team had to design and manufacture more than 1,000 individual parts to build SI1. The first, let's say, witnesses of the creation of Caesar were amazed by its uniqueness. The wow effect was off the charts.
So nice to see a fresh mind like his, and kind of like this. Michael, ballsiest move I ever seen, man.
Two handsome gray and black went on their first track tests. Without having a whole team of employees, resources, and capabilities available to larger players, Michael's team had only these two working instances. A couple of failures in the very first tests greatly undermined the team's morale, which was already low due to overall fatigue and financial problems. MotoGP rider Jeremy McWilliams agreed to test C1 first.
And the first feelings from your bike is that there is no effort required to go from left to right. You could go as fast as you needed to change direction. None of us have ever ridden a bike with that configuration, you know, that I want to ride it again.
AMA champion Shane Turpin.
I don't know where to begin. I had so much going through my head because there were so many things that I was, holy shit, that's awesome, you know? Braking, accelerating, the shifter, I mean, everything about it is, you gotta learn how to ride this thing in the turns because it's not a motorcycle, it's so different. In riding, you don't understand. You physically, nobody understands. The suspension is you felt everything that was going on that you needed to feel as a rider.
So it turns out that all these space technologies were working. The word of the racers, although it looks like a marketing move, but we have no other way to check or refute it. Objectively, the perfect story of a flawless American superbike. That's exactly how it should have been. Born in a country of liberal views and fresh ideas, he was a new word in the two-wheeled history. And this is how Americans do it.
You know, this bike has got the bones of a champion, but it's up to us to put the muscles on it.
But I couldn't take C1 to the gym. The changed MotoGP rules have reduced the engine displacement to 800cc. They started to develop 8,000 revolutions per minute, and this is already the territory of a pneumatic valve. And there was neither the strength nor the finances to remake the engine for this volume. And MotoCzysz C1 failed. The superbike situation also proved to be annoying. To take part, the manufacturer had to sell 150 units of combined equipment. To address the MotoGP situation, Michael opted to sell his superbike for a starting price of $55,000, thereby recovering the investments at least partially. Later, the superbike regulations changed. Now it was necessary to sell 1,500 units of equipment, and this was the last straw for the team's patience. And that's how the MotoCzysz C1 story ended. MotoCzysz now succeeds in transitioning to electric motorcycles successfully. Like his hero John Britton, Michael was a radical revisionist, a self-taught engineer capable of breaking the stereotypes of two-wheeled design traditions in favor of creating something completely unique and technically innovative. He really was a motorcyclist, a man not ready to compromise. Motorcycle with a Ferrari dyno engine, a cafe racer based on a V12 from two CBX engines, and simply mind-blowing H16 engine. All this is a hobby of the successful former racer Andreas Georgiadis, nicknamed George the Greek. He stood out by performing and winning on his own hand-built racing motorcycle, the engine of which was borrowed from the Honda S600 car. Andreas continues to pursue this philosophy today in the construction of his world-famous fantastic motorcycles. History shows young Georgiadis' early tech interest. After 2 years at his father's Johannesburg restaurant, he gets a new 500cc motorcycle as payment for work. This promptly resulted in Andreas' total vanishing from his father's restaurant in 1963. In the same year, he debuted in races in South Africa, finishing second. In '64, a year later, he won bronze on the Isle of Man. Such early success leads Georgiadis to the same 64th and to the Grand Prix performances, where in the very first race in Europe he takes a respectable 10th place and receives his nickname, the Greek. In total, Andreas spends a total of 3 seasons from the 64th to the 67th, performing with legends like Haywood and Agostini. His top result was 5th in Canada. Throughout, Andreas is with his loyal companion, girlfriend, and future wife Susan. Together, sharing a seat in a yellow minivan with Markelis, they travel to various cities and racetracks, thereby only emphasizing Georgiadis' free spirit. In 1968 in Canada, Andreas meets Hondo, which later completely changes his perception of technology and reveals his innate talent for innovation. As the racing press will write later, he accomplished the impossible by making the first successful endeavor to construct a racing motorcycle with a car engine and secure first position in the race. The motorcycle became the prototype AGS, named after his companion, already in the status of a wife, and was deciphered as Andro Suzanne Georgiadis. Seeing the Honda S600 car in Canada, Andreas miraculously realized that its small 4-cylinder engine fits perfectly into the Norton Monk's frame. Removing the water jackets, Andreas switched the engine to air cooling. Then the cylinder heads were replaced with those with 2 overhead camshafts and 4 valves per cylinder from the Honda racing kit. Cylinders were added to strengthen the block and reduce clearances, and the timing chain drive was converted to a belt with homemade couplings, which proved that it outperformed what the manufacturers offered for years. As a result, a racing motorcycle with a 500cc volume was obtained, which was slightly clumsy in passing turns but was powerful and fast for its time. In one of the letters to the race organizers, Andreas mentions his titles and reveals the characteristics of his motorcycle. He states that his AGS develops 100 horsepower and is capable of reaching speeds of 290 km/h on straightaways. The stock S600 engine produced only 57 horsepower. Andreas almost doubled this result. Over time, its prototype underwent many changes: fairings, unusually beautiful exhaust, and even disc brakes. From 68 to 70, Andreas consistently emerged as the victor of his creation. Having a successful racing career, including the National Championship of Canada, at one point he decides to hang up his racing suit and continue his passion for combining cars and motorcycles in more civilian models. From 1978 to 1998, Andreas constructed 3 custom motorcycles equipped with Ferrari engines. The first one was the Honda CBX, equipped with a 2-liter Ferrari Dino engine. This V6 appeared in the very first road car from Ferrari with a mid-engine layout and produced almost 200 horsepower. The Dino engine originally had a chain drive, which was also modified over time, and the engine itself was modified to accept the clutch transmission from the Suzuki Donor motorcycle. He looked good and drove well, but something was still missing. This is something he was trying to find in his next project based on the Ferrari 308 engine, installed on a homemade aluminum frame with Kawasaki suspension components. The rear wheel came from Yamaha VMAX, but instead of a drive shaft there is a regular chain drive. ASME cylindrical Italian engine produced reliable 215 horsepower, and cost nearly $55,000 in today's currency. Andreas had to exchange his bronze trophy from the podium on the Isle of Man in order to obtain this power plant for his project. Motorcycle modifications also include a new belt drive, which also operates the pump. Suzuki GT 750 radiators are installed in the rear of the motorcycle to reduce the wheelbase size. Thus, the bike has large air ducts in its tail to facilitate cooling. It is truly a genuine Frankenstein creation. Then there was a third, equally amazing motorcycle based on the same chassis as the second, but with a Ferrari dyno engine like the first. But why utilize the identical engine once more? A new level has been attained by installing a homemade supercharger to enhance performance to an unparalleled level. I dare to suggest that it was something around 300 horsepower. The supercharger was designed personally by Andreas and made from very large pieces of aluminum blanks. Unfortunately, there is no reliable data on the power of Andreas's projects. However, comparing the factory data of Ferrari engines with the two-wheeler market at that time, it is evident that Andreas rode the most powerful motorcycles of those times without any alternative. No slipping clutch, no electronic helpers, and other soulless benefits devoid of the essence of modernity. And the power by today's standards is quite modern. But all this happened 30 years ago. Only true old school. Only truly hardcore. Amazing. Georgiadis naturally did not stop searching for the most insane construction by increasing the number of cylinders. Next on the drafting board is a V12 based on two Honda CBX engines. Front from Yamaha, rear wheel and brakes from Suzuki, transmission from Honda CBX, also used on Ferrari 5.8 by the same person. All 12 intake manifolds are powered by 3 Weber carburetors, and the exhaust is a complex 12-4 system. And it's also a really beautiful and stylish motorcycle, in which it seems there is nothing extra. And of course, the sound of a motorcycle. He is simply unique. After 26 years and 4 crazy motorcycles under his belt, Andres was not satisfied with just sitting at home, folding his arms and admiring his own achievements. Georgiadis, like many others I talk about on this channel, is a genius. He creates real old-school masterpieces that are unlikely to ever appear anywhere else. Currently, he's working on building a distinctive motorcycle using the innovative H16 engine design. This design was used on the Lotus 43 race car from the BRM team at the United States Grand Prix. The experimental prototype brought victory to the racer Jim Clark and is now considered one of the most unprecedented examples in the history of motorsport. H16 Andracer is currently in active development phase. It's too early to talk about him in detail. The only thing that is known is that 4 YZF-600 Thundercat engines became donors for it. The basic construction of the engine is 2 engines connected together to form a flat 8, and then 2 such flat 8s placed on top of each other are connected to the CBRT transmission, clamped between the crankshafts. Engine capacity of 2396 cubic centimeters, slipping from VF1000R and still created without computers and any control unit. All built on pure enthusiasm. Just imagine a motorcycle with a 16-cylinder engine. Just have to wait.
What about a 2-liter single barrel? And yes, such a thing exists. And today we're going to take a look at the creation of the German constructor Fritz Langer, NSU Bison 2000, whose engine was made from a cylinder of an aviation engine. As of today, the NSU Bison 2000 holds the record for the biggest single-cylinder engine in the world. Earlier, a motorcycle NSU 1000 was built by a Langer, also a single-cylinder and also the holder of this record, but soon it was surpassed by another with a volume of 1.5 liters. And to conquer a new peak, Fritz starts building the Bison 2000. Langer took the NSU Console 500 motorcycle as a base, completely reworking the frame and suspension to fit the new engine, but preserving the authenticity and retro style of a 50s motorcycle. Then he installed this incredibly monstrous aviation cylinder, increasing its displacement to a mind-boggling 2,000 cubic centimeters. Just one piston weighed over 3 kilograms, which made Fritz seek the craftsman from Mali, who reduced the weight of this part to 1.5 kilograms, specifically 1650 grams, with a diameter of 146 millimeters. Also, the carter had to be increased by 6 centimeters in width to match the cylinder diameter. However, the magnitude of this bike doesn't stop there, as the stainless steel exhaust pipe possesses a diameter of 75mm and is without a muffler. In connection with this, the sound of this motorcycle was also mind-blowing, so like, just listen to this, you know. And now for the cherry on top. This beast starts up with the help of Kickstarter. And let's leave this aspect, I guess, on the conscience of our imagination. Today our collection of rarest and most amazing motorcycles has been enriched with yet another very strange but unique specimen. Thanks for your attention.
At first glance, the strange motorcycle turned out to be a brilliant invention by the legendary American racer Dan Gurney. His concept of compactly positioning the rider inside the motorcycle has had a unique influence on its handling, aerodynamics, and dynamic traits. Knowing the advantages that this unique motorcycle has received, you will at least want to ride it. Yeah. Dan Gurney is primarily known as an extremely talented racer and engineer. Being in the same team with legends like Jim Clark, Graham Hill, and Sterling Moss in the 60s, Gurney often made it to the podium. He made history in motorsport by winning the Belgian Grand Prix in 1967, the first and only victory on an American chassis in F1. Dan accomplished it on Gurney Eagle. In the initial car of the then AAR, the teams were formed by Gurney in collaboration with Carl Shelby in the year 1964. Besides the formula, there were wins in Indy on the Scar. The most interesting is he's starting the tradition of spraying champagne on the podium when he did it in Le Mans in the 67 after winning the 24-hour race in the GT40. Dan also stood out for his tall height. That's why his GT40 had this strange hump on the roof. This will be the primary reason to build a motorcycle where the rider is positioned not on the motorcycle, but inside it, similar to how one would be in a car. And of course, Gurney has always been a strong foe of the so-called sterilization of the formula. The lack of innovation due to strict design rules, which will become the second main reason for the strangeness and uniqueness of his motorcycle. Soon, Shelby leaves AAR, leaving Gurney at the helm, where he will spend almost his entire life. Over time, Anglo-American Racer will transform into All-American Racers, continue producing racing equipment, and eventually design its first and only two-wheeled car. After all, another passion of Dan's was motorcycles. The bike got the name Alligator thanks to its long wheelbase, low height, and also because alligators are mainly found in America. He began as Gurney's personal endeavor to design a dream motorcycle that would be suitable for his lofty height. The first prototype was built in 1980 based on the Honda XL 350 and was labeled A1. Only the frame was heavily modified on the motorcycle. Dan redesigned it to lower the seat as much as possible, and the homemade triangular frame allowed him to create a chair with a height limited by the required stroke of the extended pendulum. The footrest with the controls were moved closer to the front wheel, like on cruisers. A1 started a series of prototypes that gradually improved the concept and characteristics. Despite the clumsy look, the idea proved reasonable. The handling was surprisingly good. Plus, it was impossible to put such a long wheelbase on the rear or front wheel. This means that you can quickly open the throttle and also decelerate sharply without overloading the front end. And of course, the chair's comfort was combined with the sports bike's maneuverability. Gurney's concept was smarter than creating a convenient motorcycle for a tall racer. For a long time, Alligator was a secondary target that Gurney himself worked on between projects in the back of the AAR store. A 1 to A3 prototypes repaired on time, not tested on roads in California Canyon and local racing tracks in 80S 90S. Every time they appeared in public, they were real showstoppers, attracting attention at rest stops along the canyon routes. Alligator Gurney is undoubtedly a motorcycle and has all the standard components. They are just arranged in this way, which has not been observed since the discontinuation of Nirakar in the year 1927. This challenges traditional classification of motorcycles, and it works well in different roles. Until the late 90s, Alligators were prototypes, and an unfinished appearance overshadowed their design. This will change with the appearance of A4. In the year 1999, Den presented a fully polished, production-ready prototype with a streamlined body. AAR has just ended their participation in kart, and they have new resources and time that could be dedicated to the Alligator project. The fairing is now made of carbon fiber. The engine is modified from the Honda XR600 with electronic fuel injection, and the swing arm became fashionable at that time. The frame is now made to order with chrome molybden, and the fuel tank has been moved under the seat to make more room for the tall engine. All prototypes had single-cylinder engines. The aim was for the Alligator to be light, simple, maneuverable, and powerful. But the power itself was not the aim of the project. The targets for the Alligator production spec were about 80 horsepower, with a weight of about 136 kilograms. In combination with grip, this promised quick acceleration, and with the narrow frontal profile of the motorcycle, good aerodynamics was a bonus. Production was supposed to reach a speed of 240 kilometers per h. Not bad for a single from a big trailer motorcycle. However, despite hopes for a soon start of production, A4 was postponed and later improved. A 5 appeared. However, production cost was unreasonably high and more development was needed before showing the Alligator to the audience. In 2002, the public finally saw the last serial prototype of the A6, which enhanced the design of the A4 and A5, and sounded new with a more carefully tuned Honda single.
Greatest four-wheel racers now manufactures this 40-mile-an-hour AAR Alligator. With its for Gurney, building the Alligator is the realization
Prior upgrades additionally consisted of a front fork Honda Fireblade equipped with Brembo Goldline brakes and 5-spoke Dymac magnesium wheels. They swapped the one-sided swing arm for the usual one with double shock absorbers. The seat height, the main goal, was an absurdly low 45 centimeters. The power was provided by the XR650 single, increased to 710cc, with air cooling, with more aggressive camshafts and a special fuel injection system. Under the engine and seat there was a non-standard suspended exhaust system. The declared power was over 70 horsepower. Equipped mass, 145 kilograms. Slightly off goal, but not enough to disappoint. 36 blue and white copies set for production to honor the number and national livery of the 1967 Spa Gurney Eagle winner. A 6 was sold for $35,000 per unit, and a small edition was quickly sold to collectors and museums around the world. But what in the end? What is the Alligator like in its natural habitat? He ended up as a highly charismatic motorcycle. With amazing grip and torque, the Alligator rapidly accelerated to 50 km per h in only 1.1 seconds, setting a record in the 2002 Cycle World tests. This thing exchanged 100 in just 3 seconds. The handling was good because it is extremely close to telepathy. You are sitting inside the chassis and are the center of gravity. You can literally control a motorcycle with your thoughts. The slightest movements affect his behavior. In the end, you don't control the motorcycle from above, as is usually the case, but work from the inside. Racers and observers highly appreciated dynamics of the unusual motorcycle. In other words, mission accomplished. But why didn't Alligator become a real hit, a new trend in the world of two wheels? His problem was that he was difficult to classify. Regardless of his skill in the real world, his appearance was too radical for most motorcyclists, who tend to have conservative preferences. He was too relaxed and not powerful enough for sports motorcycle enthusiasts, too sporty and modern for cruiser fans, and just strange for everyone else. Mass production was never the goal of the Alligator. Dan Gurney aimed to build a cool motorcycle, breaking stereotypes and thinking independently, but he never intended to make a fortune from it. There were 36 serial models conceived, and that's all they built. In the end, the Alligator remained an object of collection, reflecting the unique, innovative vision of one person who wanted to break the evolutionary chain of motorcycle design with the help of a new type of reptiles.
Dieter Hartmann-Vine is the name of a German motorcycle enthusiast who managed to fit 8 pistons into an engine originally designed as wet wing. After the fall, which completely changed his life, he not only did not give up, but also continued to create unique developments with extremely unconventional and witty design. This is a narrative about a unique motorcycle with an extremely romantic name, Ducati Elanor. Rimbach-Odenwald. This is a commune on the southern German wine route with a population of about 8,600 people. Dieter H. Wortwein has lived here with family for 38 years. Dieter has a Ducati 900 SS and a Bultaca Alpina 370, both with advantages. By the way, it was from this motorcycle that his design activity began. In the early 90s, he designed and manufactured a cylinder head for this motorcycle to switch from 2-stroke to 4-stroke. The homemade camshaft with roller followers was driven by a chain. The design fulfilled all the requirements, and in 1992 the German Technical Supervision Organization TÜV provided its approval. The test bench displayed a measurement of 15 horsepower at 3,700 revolutions per minute. Dieter was able to move freely and legally on his own modified motorcycle. Despite his concerns, the homemade head did not cause any problems. Engineer by education, Dieter worked at a car factory, dealing with the assembly line rather than the engine design, as one might think. On the morning of March 2, 2002, he was heading to work on his 900 SS. Dieter knew the route he was taking very well. Every turn, angle, entry speed, every bump and every pothole. He was also an experienced driver, thanks to his numerous motorcycle tours around Europe. But on that March morning, unfortunately, all this turned out to be useless. At a temperature of about 0 degrees Celsius, the front wheel slips and Dieter hits his back against the bumper. This fall will radically change his entire life. Since then, Dieter will forever be confined to a wheelchair. But it didn't break his spirit. 4 years after the unfortunate incident, he finds the strength for a new project. Probably the true sincere love for technology of such people, such enthusiasts. Their vision of a motorcycle as something more than just a means of transportation allows them to make such acts in such difficult life situations. In 2006, Dieter began developing and installing a 4-valve cylinder head in the engine of the BMW R50 racing motorcycle. Before the DIOHC Boxer HP2 Sports launch from BMW, everything went smoothly. However, the engineer was struck by another intriguing idea that piqued their interest. Dieter planned to make a compact 4-cylinder engine from a single cylinder, using one connecting rod. The system, as befits ingenious things, turned out to be simple and even thought-provoking. Why didn't anyone consider this earlier? The new project was named Monkey 125-4. Yes, here the Dieter was less original. So, Hartmann based its mini-bike on the Honda Z50 Monkey, or rather its Chinese copy, as claimed in the sources. From her small 50cc single-cylinder 4-stroke engine with a power of 2 horsepower, Dieter transformed it into a genuine inline 4-cylinder engine. The project started in March 2007, when he took apart a Chinese monkey's engine for measurements. Dieter modeled it on the computer every day for 2 months. He himself produced most of the products: the distributor shaft, cylinder blocks, rocker arms and connecting rods. As for the valves and pistons, Dieter used original Honda parts here. Instead of one original piston with a diameter of 39 mm, now there were 4 25 mm pistons here. The common camshaft for roughly speaking 4 2-valve heads is driven by a timing belt. But how did he manage to affix 4 pistons to one connecting rod? His patent will provide us with information about this technology. On it you can see that 4 individual cylinders are installed on an auxiliary base, which is fixed in place of the cylinder through which the original connecting rod passes.
The V-shaped support is attached to the original connecting rod, on which two central pistons are installed. Two lateral pistons on the opposite side are in motion through an auxiliary kinematic mechanism comprising of 4 short connecting rods and 2 rockers that are attached between the cylinders. There is an opinion that in this way the oscillating mass is saved, its movement is reduced, the crankshaft is simplified, and this should have a positive effect. The engine should gain speed faster. Friction losses should be reduced. But there is an alternative judgment that implies the possibility of a strong lateral displacement due to ultra-short cranks. Therefore, it is inefficient and not wear resistant. About a year after project start, the 4-cylinder engine was finished and started for the first time. Dieter did not find a suitable plate with 4 carburetors that could be placed in the chassis, so the original carburetor, which fed 4 cylinders, was left. His son Fabian held a glass of gasoline from which fuel flowed into the carburetor through a hose. Dieter was very worried that his engine could fall apart due to material defects, incorrect calculations, or lack of lubrication. He was amazed the engine started on the first try. 2 days later, the 4-cylinder engine will be revived in this small frame. Parking in front of the supermarket will be the location of the first test drive. Fabian did multiple laps, and Dieter recorded everything and shared it online. The sound of this 4-cylinder engine reminded me of the legendary Honda CB750. He is as loud as the response from the network. Numerous test drive requests come in 6 weeks after the first video has been released and gained traction. The small 4-cylinder engine is suitable and vibrates less than the original. He responds well to gas and shouts his thirst from the exhaust pipe. Output power is readable, but be careful not to tip over on this tiny thing. At speeds around 8,000, thrust keeps increasing. 8,000 though is achieved instantly. According to Dieter's estimates, power was about 6-7 horsepower. But, as Dieter himself says, Monkey 125.4 was just a training motorcycle before a really big project. At the Intermot 2010 exhibition, Dieter presented his new motorcycle. It was the fateful Ducati 900 SS that Dieter rode to work and that had already changed his life once. And as you correctly guessed, the power unit in it was not a standard V-shaped twin, but a compact, built on Monkey 4 principle, 8-cylinder V-shaped. The total volume of all combustion chambers now amounts to 868 cubic centimeters, as indicated by the plate on the engine, and the power reaches 80 horsepower. At the exhibition, along with the motorcycle, a 3D visualization of the observed mechanism was presented. The goal of the project is for the V8 to operate as a 2-cylinder engine at lower speeds, without the inherent vibration, and to rev up like crazy. Dieter believes that if V8 provides the same performance but slightly earlier, then there must be something against such an engine. At the time of the presentation, the engine hadn't even started yet, but after 9 years, in September 2019, a video appeared on the internet with a fully functioning Ducati Elanor engine. In December of the same year, the following photos also appeared on official sources. This means that work on Ducati Elanor is underway. In addition, it is worth mentioning where Dieter Hartmann-Vine works on his motorcycles. He does it in the attic of his house, where his workshop is located. Lathes and milling machines, hundreds of kilograms of spare parts, and a computer are on 50 square meters of parquet flooring. Marc Chagall's paintings hang on the walls, and the sunlight shines through the huge front windows, the color mood that can only be found in delivery rooms. Dieter responds to this comparison with a smile, perhaps because my child was born in this place. This company called Eisenberg was taking orders for a motorcycle with a V8 engine, 3 liters in volume, and a power of over 480 horsepower. Zef Eisenberg, the founder of Eisenberg, is renowned for his land speed records. However, he is also recognized as a somewhat eccentric scientist in the realm of motorcycle construction. And this is his craziest project. First of all, what is a V8 motorcycle and why did Zef probably build a better one? Take for example the Boss Horse as the most famous motorcycle with a V-shaped 8. Did you see how big he is and his weight? His power does not seem as impressive when compared to his monstrous weight. There is an even crazier version of Rap with an inflatable V8 engine that boasts 1,000 horsepower, even more powerful, huge and ridiculous. And yeah, a motorcycle with an engine from a monster truck is definitely overkill. The most compact of them was the MotoGP racing bike from the distant 60s. Then he naturally scared his pilots, outpaced suspensions, brakes, and racer skills for years. The most successful motorcycles suitable for use on roads with a V8 configuration are usually perfectly suited for large off-road vehicles or high-performance business sedans, were built in Australia. Jan Drysdale, a genius, built multiple incredible homemade motorcycles, including a series with V8 engines and displacements of 750 and 1000 cc. PGM with their V8 also performed excellently, squeezing a 2-liter V8 engine from 2 Yamaha R1 engines, with peak revs at 12,800 revolutions per minute into a lattice frame, taking out 334 horsepower from it and somehow keeping the curb weight at 242 kilograms. Zev came in a similar way to PGM, putting together a street fighter weighing 280 kilograms and with a power of 480 horsepower on regular fuel and 500 on high octane. Not only does the resulting motorcycle possess a record power-to-weight ratio of 1.78 horsepower per kilogram, but it also behaves and appears like a conventional motorcycle in terms of functionality and aesthetics. A very sleek and high-tech motorcycle. Zef Eisenberg, the founder of the Mad Max racing team, didn't just build such a crazy motorcycle for no reason. The New York spirit of a Brit has previously led him repeatedly to significant results in speed racing. Behind him is the record for the fastest gas turbine motorcycle, records for the fastest race on sand on 2 and 4 wheels. Eisenberg V8 was also involved in setting another record, but we'll discuss that in more detail later. He is also a massive fan of TT Island Man. Zef sponsored racer Daley Mattison in a total of 3 TT0 races with high hopes and great expectations for the year 2019 on Nottingham University's electric motorcycle. However, Mattison died in the race a day before he was supposed to perform. To honor Daley's memory, Zef souped up his bike and set 4 world speed records on it in September 1919. Outside of racing, Zef remained a hardcore businessman. In the 90s, he had his own sports nutrition company and was into bodybuilding for a long time. In July 1919, Mad Max Pizza was opened, and he also completed the Eisenberg V8 serial project. His skill in team sports, individual races, and building motorcycles was so great that in October 2019, he was awarded the Sims Medal for outstanding contribution to automotive innovations, including the Eisenberg V8. Eisenberg built this thing from scratch, working with one of the top engine designers in Britain to produce a compact flat V8 with a maximum RPM of 11,000. It has more in common with a Ferrari powertrain than with the low-revving American Boss Horse engines, showcasing Eisenberg's expertise and attention to detail. The engine weighs only 88 kilograms. Here, listen and imagine having this thing between your legs. The company RPE, Radical Precision Engines, which stands for Radical High Precision Engines, is focused on enhancing existing serial engines and constructing distinctive motors derived from them. On their website, you can find info about the upgraded Hayabusa engine with over 220 horsepower and the V8 made from 2 Hayabusa engines, which delivers 430 horsepower and weighs only 22 kilograms more than the stock Bussy engine, which weighs 105 kilograms. Zev set his eyes on the last one. Together they built another version of the V8 with a volume of 3,000 cubic centimeters and a power output of 480 horsepower on regular fuel and 500 on high-octane fuel. But the most interesting thing is that according to their claims, they managed to achieve an engine weight of 88 kilograms. That's a whole 5 kilograms more than the stock Hayabusa 4. The Eisenberg V8 is equipped with 8 independent throttle valves featuring adjustable geometry for optimal airflow and response to the throttle, ensuring the best performance and efficiency. The dampers are controlled by a special Atmotech control unit. There are modes of operation that limit the engine power, disabling, for example, half of its cylinders. So in rainy mode, the power drops to a laughable 240 horsepower, just 240 horses in the rain. In addition, experienced racers will receive a special red key that, when activated, allows full control of the Eisenberg V8 without any electronic interference. It took more than 2 years to develop a special 6-speed gearbox, and according to Eisenberg, the transmission box was tested on a stand and patented. To sustain such high power, the transmission is furnished with certain special components, such as interchangeable primary gears that are visible on MotoGP racing prototypes. Due to the high torque of the engine and its position in the motorcycle chassis, a problem has arisen. That's why the gearbox has a balanced centrifugal clutch. The clutch rotates opposite to the crankshaft, reducing vibrations. Zev states vibrations are low enough to balance a coin on the block without it falling off. Besides that, the motorcycle has a swing arm with a concentric design and geometry that prevents squatting in order to reduce chain tension issues, because here they use the less durable 530, not the heavier 630. Thanks to her, friction level decreases and engine doesn't lose power. The swing itself is made using CNC and aluminum blanks, from which several kilograms are cut off to reduce the weight of the motorcycle. The motorcycle, particularly around the engine, was designed to withstand the full load on the frame and transmission. The real work problems arose from the moment the team realized the full extent of the work needed to reduce heating. This is a serious problem. To deal with it, they installed a little radiator under the seat, which is meant for low-speed driving, as well as a big one in the front for high-speed driving. The main radiator minimizes aerodynamic impact. ProDrive aided by conducting computational hydrodynamics, analyzing flow of water and air around the engine for design optimization and reduced drag. In the remaining portion, as you can envision, this bicycle is equipped with a plethora of high-quality particulars, which encompass BST carbon wheels, a customized nitron shock absorber, ISR brakes, and a specially crafted Akrapovic exhaust system with ceramic coating. The motorcycle also possesses a multimedia screen with a complete data recorder and internet access. With that type of power, you can confidently anticipate some substantial top speed. During a few tests, the Eisenberg V8 engine achieved a speed of 333 km per hour. Zev claims that the bike can reach a top speed of 362 km per hour. And all this without using a nitrous oxide turbocharger and a fairing. Plus, by adding a fairing, the maximum speed can increase up to 402 km per hour. And this is just downright outrageous for a motorcycle that's meant for use on public roads. The motorcycle went through engine bench tests and road tests to make sure that the production motorcycle provides smooth clutch engagement, maneuverability, proper gearbox operation, suspension, engine cooling quality, and so on. British motorsport giants ProDrive helped them out with this, lending a hand to Eisenberg during the final stages of regulatory approval. By the way, orders are only accepted from drivers who know how to handle power, with invitations to exclusive events. They were supposed to start producing motorcycles in 2020. The price was expected to be sky high, £150,000 sterling. But whether they began or not is unclear. In the same year, Zef Eisenberg tragically died in a car crash during another try to break the speed record. The company's website is empty and production volumes are unknown. Most likely we'll see test drives of these phenomenal motorcycles, as the resulting product has a crazy sound comparable only to Formula One cars, beautifully designed chassis, and unparalleled acceleration with such energy efficiency. In other words, everything that people love about motorcycles. Daniel Fisher, an AMA superbike racer, saw an opportunity to fill a gap in the market for mid-sized sport bikes to give enthusiasts a worthy exotic experience by introducing the world's first motorcycle with a monocoque frame, as well as creating a truly American sport bike that could compete with the Japanese in their own game with good performance, good quality, and a good price. The American-made Fisher MRX will be the culmination of several years of trials, errors, failures, and massive developments. The outcome was a motorcycle with a highly controversial appearance, but one that enthusiasts have been longing for years. A high-performance two-cylinder supersport with a one-of-a-kind frame that was perfect in every way, except for its looks. Let's say you want to buy a middleweight sport bike with a two-cylinder engine. Just think for a sec, how many options do you have? No, definitely not the Ducati 848. He would have been in the category of superbikes until the racing rules were changed. The Kawasaki Ninja 650 and its direct competitor, the Suzuki SV 650, can hardly be called sport motorcycles, as they are aimed at beginners and do not have proper suspension out of the box. Think really hard and you'll realize that there was practically no market for two-cylinder sport motorcycles, despite the constant mumbling and weak demand from those ghostly figures they constantly call enthusiasts. In the past 20 years, if you needed a small, light, easy to handle, not powerful two-cylinder machine with nimble chassis, you'd go for the Suzuki SV 650 and quickly upgrade the stock suspension and brakes. Now the market is finally ready and models like Aprilia RS 660, KTM RC 8C, and Yamaha R7 are starting to appear. Please don't confuse it with the ultra-rare R7007. We're talking about the last 2 decades. It was the year 2001 and Daniel Fisher, an AMA racer and former participant of the Aprilia Cup from Chicago, Illinois, had an idea for an American-made sport bike. No competition. Walter Rarick delayed unveiling his ill-fated V-Royer until 2007. Eric Buell worked under the heel of Harley, limiting himself to a pharmacy dealer network and using outdated Sportsters. His fancy schmancy Helican engine won't show up until 2008, just a few months before his company goes belly up due to the economic downturn. So as a result, there was a huge gap in the market that Fisher hoped to fill with a product in the USA that would touch on ordinary patriotic American feelings. That would be a badass sport bike that would revive the stagnant American motorcycle industry. And initially MRX didn't start out as an affordable sports motorcycle. He was thinking about how to launch the production of a real American superbike that could kick the asses of the big boys from Asia and Europe while chewing gum. The Fisher motor racing concept, named after Dan Mercer's son, involved the creation of a modern chassis based on an existing engine. The initial option was the V-shaped two-cylinder Rotax V990 engine with a 60-degree angle of separation, which you may recall from bikes like the Aprilia Mille and Tuono. So the prototypes will be called MR1000. Fisher claimed that the V-shaped pair got on board completely by accident. Rotax made contact with him after he placed a wanted ad in the AMA Classifieds in the year 2001, in response to his post. Gemini Technologies Systems, a well-known engineering firm from Wisconsin which developed the acclaimed Harley-Davidson VR1000 frame, has created a new platform based on their experience in superbike racing, incorporating MotoGP know-how. The most interesting thing is the appearance drawn by the designer with over 30 years of experience, Glinker. His design has created many stunning motorcycles from renowned brands, for example the Lightning LS 218. Then this occurred. Honestly, the Fischer looks like a dull Chinese knockoff of the Honda CBR 600RR with a scooter engine from the 2000s. This honestly does not measure up to the level of many motorcycles from the celestial empire of our days. He seems kind of toy-like, unreal. And the underseat exhaust looks like something foreign, installed in PVC. But you can and should turn a blind eye to this, because in all other respects, the bike is amazing. They intended to commence production in 2004 and conducted some encouraging experimental design work in 2003 when multiple prototypes were incorporated into the production process. Unfortunately, there was a little pushback from Aprilia against what Rotax offered for Fischer, which they considered their own engine. The V990 was the only big 4-stroke twin-cylinder engine in the Rotax lineup at that time, and Aprilia considered it their own development. They were the sole company utilizing it and desired to remain in that position. They definitely didn't want him to be used by a beginner competitor. Why didn't Aprilia make a fuss in 2006 when their longtime partner Rotax BRP stuffed the same dumb motor into their Can-Am Spyder? Most likely Aprilia didn't see any threats in the Canadian trike aimed at snowmobile drivers. It turns out that Fischer was prematurely tied to Rotax, who swiftly offered their engine for his project and never once hinted that he might not be allowed to use the V990 in production. However, as soon as Aprilia spoke up, Fischer was cut off from Rotax. Emster 1000 kicked the bucket, all ready to go into production, but Fischer kept on trucking. Despite losing the Austrian heart, the MR chassis has become a good starting point for further development and engine transplant. Gemini developed a one-of-a-kind frame design for Fischer using a cast alloy, with the involvement of Caterpillar, which they referred to as trailer spar. Upon initial observation, it is simple to assume that wide flat stringers are merely a typical hollow two-beam diagonal frame. However, in actuality, the frame is a totally distinctive design, which was the initial monocoque frame ever provided on a production vehicle. If you closely examine the majority of production frames, you will observe that they are composed of multiple cast sections that have been welded together. The Fischer design eliminates the need for multiple parts and adds a bonus in the form of strictly controlled rigidity. The subframe was designed in a similar manner, with the aim of reducing the number of manufacturing operations involved. The part of the nickname trailer spar refers to its internal structure, which has triangular edges embedded in the inner part of the beams. Fischer claimed this hybrid design offers the best of both worlds, the rigidity and lightweight of a diagonal frame with the controlled flex of a lattice structure. The thing is, the motorcycle frame has to have a regulated stiffness, and here's why. Imagine a motorcycle in a leaned position. If the speed of passing the turn is high enough, there may be a situation where both the front and rear suspensions, under the influence of centrifugal force, compress by 100%. In the event that occurs, any small protrusion extending from the asphalt will result in the wheels losing grip with the road surface and the motorcycle sliding or toppling over. But even if the suspension is not fully compressed, the force vector applied to the wheel in the turn is not exactly in the direction of suspension compression, but at a certain angle. It's difficult to manage the fork and pendulum with forces. They are designed to work only in their movement direction. That's why the frame stiffness can only be increased up to a certain limit, so that it takes on the role of a kind of spring and absorbs rigid lateral loads that the suspension can't handle. Moreover, increasing the stiffness of the frame often leads to its heaviness, and excess weight is our enemy. The last thing to be wary of excessive stiffness is the danger of losing the feel of the motorcycle or otherwise losing informativeness. The thing is, the pilot feels how the motorcycle holds the road while riding precisely thanks to the vibrations that occur in the loaded chassis. If the frame is too rigid, some vibrations will disappear or their amplitude will decrease, making it harder for the racer to recognize the tire grip boundary with the asphalt. On the other hand, we all know damn well what happens when the frame is too flexible. The handling is getting worse, the motorcycle tends to wobble, precise control becomes an impossible task. And it turns out that unlike a car, where the stiffer the chassis, the better, the rigidity of a motorcycle frame should be very optimal, at the level of the golden mean. Fischer tried to create the perfect balance of stiffness and flexibility to ensure exceptional maneuverability, and according to most assessments, they managed to build an excellent chassis. That's all good, but without the AMR engine, it was just going to be a well-designed blank. The solution came, as they say, out of nowhere. Hyosung, a South Korean manufacturer of small displacement motorcycles, released their first adult motorcycle in 2004 with the Comet and GT 650 models. Back then, there was a lot of commotion because this newbie turned out to be the twin brother of the Suzuki SV 650 twins. There were rumors that Hyosung was involved in assembling and manufacturing Suzuki components offered on outsourcing. Others claim that Hyusun replaced one or maybe several engineers who worked on the DSV 650, which sounds a bit strange because the 650 was built on the basis of a 400 cubic engine and was not developed from scratch. Anyway, the resemblance between Suzuki and the Korean newcomer was noticeable. Both were modern 90-degree V-twin engines with a displacement of 650 cubic centimeters, chain drive, 2 overhead camshafts, and 4 valves per cylinder. Both featured liquid cooling, a 6-speed transmission, and their power ratings were incredibly close to each other. However, contrary to the popular myth, the Hudson engine is not an exact copy or an updated version of the SV engine. The cylinder diameter and piston stroke are different. This is a completely different design, and they have no common details. Fischer saw the Hyusun engine as a cost-effective alternative, and Hyusun turned out to be a willing partner. Hyusun could provide the company with a ready, reliable, and pleasant engine that they could install in their beautiful frame. You could also appropriate any other necessary small items from the Korean donor, which would help to decrease the overall expenses and lower the retail price. Suddenly, the world's top sport bike transformed into a budget supersport, and Fischer modified the marketing to match the new direction. This was originally supposed to be an American-made product, or at least American-assembled, but now it will be keeping up and staying competitive with the Asian manufacturers in the highly competitive and fiercely contested middleweight sports category. This will be an affordable and exotic product. The company would emphasize the quality of Fischer components and developments, offering a price that is comparable to mass-produced options, but with a better value for money proposition. The MR1000 is now referred to as the MRX 650. The Hyusun engine was left mostly unchanged, but it now features an air intake positioned between the headlights and a complete Micron exhaust system. The peak power was claimed to be around 80 horsepower. Taking into account the inertia overboost, which is the same figure that Hyusun claimed for his standard GT 650, although Hyusun's figure usually turned out to be very optimistic in real tests. A prototype with forced induction was built as a test stand for a possible future model with forced induction. The idea was that the turbo model would be the flagship built instead of the model with a larger displacement. Production was halted at the facility in Pocomoke, Maryland. The first MRX prototype was shown with an Öhlins fork and shock absorber and Brembo radial brakes. But in the production version, they decided to ditch the trendy brakes and front parts in favor of more modest equipment. Now, the fork was made up of inverted 43mm elements taken from the Huisson GT 650R with preload compression adjustment. Fischer mentioned that certain internal modifications were implemented on Korean forks in order to enhance control. The brake discs, wheels, and calipers were directly sourced from the Comet, but they received enhancements in the form of stainless steel brake lines and a front master cylinder from Brembo. The front Brembo calipers were optional, but it seems that they became standard for later versions. The claimed dry weight was 180 kilograms. The MRX series kept the rear shock absorber from Öhlins, which became a key marketing element for Fischer and one of the most notable features of the motorcycle. The highly developed American frame and swing, unfortunately, went unnoticed by most people who preferred to drool over the fancy Swedish shock absorber. While most people were surprised to find Öhlins on a motorcycle costing less than $10,000, it's worth noting that Öhlins produces a wide range of shock absorbers, ranging from mid-range coilovers with basic settings for a few $100s, up to world superbike specification racing shocks which are more costly than a slightly pre-owned vehicle. Guess which one MRX had? By 2006, production-ready prototypes were sent to the press, and Alan Cathcart wrote a notable review, published in the December issue of MotorCyclist magazine for 2006. He praised the new motorcycle. Cathcart noted a few minor drawbacks, but overall was impressed with the performance and quality of the innovative brand, adding a few phrases to strengthen the Made in America image. At the end of 2006, Fischer delivered about 20 bikes to his first customers, but full-scale production was still a long way off. For the year 2007, only 50 bikes were planned, and in the subsequent years, production was expected to gradually increase to more than 1,000 bikes per year once production, sales, and dealer network were properly organized. We were offered upgraded models of R, as well as a range of options to improve MRX at the factory with the help of a bunch of clever and expensive parts. You could easily raise the price of the MRX by about $20,000, which would eliminate the selling point of the motorcycle, but it would allow you to customize the bike to your liking right at the factory. And then 2008 happened. Boutique brands around the world have collapsed, there was no dealer network, so the company relied on direct orders. The development was limited, and the motorcycle remained more or less unchanged. While the idea of an inflatable engine was thrown out, what plans are there for a model with a larger displacement? It's interesting that despite the statement about delivering 20 bikes in 2006 and building at least 50 in 2007, Fisher MRX No. 1 was delivered to the customer in Minnesota in 2009. In 2010, they announced an updated model of the MRX 650L, which was basically a standard MRX with a lowered seat. Meanwhile, marketing was in a slump if you don't count the weird press releases, and the website continued to look horribly outdated. Despite the fact that the product had potential and was backed by engineering, the company's attempt to sell MRX was a disaster. The brand swiftly dissolved into obscurity. After the initial excitement died down, typical critical remarks from enthusiasts started to appear in forum discussions, marking the beginning of its decline in popularity. Many people were deterred by using the Hudson engine, which didn't have a good reputation, and a lot of individuals questioned using carburetors on a modern motorcycle, especially considering that Houston Comet had switched to fuel injection by that time. Athletes were laughing at the concept of a super sports motorcycle with 80 horsepower, and out loud they wondered what happened to the promised version with the made-up one. The recurring observation was that it would be more intelligent to purchase an SV650 and utilize the remaining funds to implement some enhancements to it. This eloquently demonstrates how challenging it was to enter such a market with a completely new motorcycle, regardless of the attractiveness and fairness of its price. In those rare cases when people managed to see and ride on a Fisher, most of them noted that the quality of the components left much to be desired, especially those parts that were stolen from Comet. Turns out, not many people noticed the patriotism, especially considering the amount of South Korean parts that were bolted onto the MRX. On the other hand, nobody really complained about the price or the level of standard equipment, and those who actually drove them noted that the handling was excellent and the engine was suitable for everyday driving, if not impressively powerful. Skepticism is a genuine obstacle when it comes to selling motorcycles. Even if the product is competitive, bikers can be a fickle and deeply ingrained group that is unlikely to choose an untested brand. By 2012, a small advertisement was placed on the company's website homepage. MRX is sold out and no longer being produced. Stay tuned for the latest news. No extra details are provided. Dan Fisher tried to build a completely American superbike, and in the end created an interesting supersport that answered the calls of enthusiasts who wanted a lightweight, maneuverable, high-tech sport motorcycle with a friendly engine. Regrettably for Fisher, the desires they assert they have and the items that individuals will truly purchase are two entirely distinct matters of great significance. The MRX 650 fought against serious competition, general skepticism, poor marketing, and a prevailing apathetic attitude towards a motorcycle with a South Korean engine and a strange design. In all these debates, everyone has said goodbye to the possibility of getting a truly unique motorcycle. A motorbike with a specific twist. In a nutshell, a truly exotic motorcycle that is rarely, or rather never, expected to have a reasonable monetary value.
The flagship of the Kawasaki company, the Ninja H2R, which was unveiled in 2015, completely overshadowed the entire motorcycle industry with its achievements. But did you know that almost simultaneously, in the general public, a motorcycle was introduced, developed and built by an Australian engineer with over 20 years of experience in MotoGP, WSBK and F1? PGM, a motorcycle that underwent a 7-year development process. It is equipped with a high-revving 2-liter V8 engine, which was built based on 2 Yamaha R1 engines and has a peak power of 334 horsepower. Actually, this is the most powerful production motorcycle in the world, and today we'll get to know it better and try to compare it to the iconic H2R. Paul Milani, an experienced Australian engineer, the creator and owner of the brand, gathered a team of 3 equally experienced specialists. Clayton Stearman, a specialist in engine development and construction, Neville Hazelman, a master with over 40 years of experience in engine preparation, especially VSBK, and Sean O'Shane, a guy with experience in tuning and preparing racing motorcycles. Together they brought this engine into the world. Why V8? Answer by Paul.
Alright, so you claim that this is the most powerful production motorcycle in the world.
Yes.
So can you tell about that one, please?
Okay. The engine is made completely from scratch.
Okay.
It is a 2-liter V8.
Okay. So you have made a V8 out of 2-liter.
2 1-liter
Okay.
Yamaha R1 engines.
Alright, okay.
Yes. We have 334 horsepower
Uh-huh.
at the output shaft,
Okay.
at the counter shaft, and 214 Newton meters of torque.
Okay.
Riding this bike is, so far no one's had more than 28% throttle. It is not possible.
It's not possible
No.
to...
This will spin the back wheel at 200 kilometers an hour in 6th gear.
Okay. In 6th gear, you are telling we can experience a backspin?
Yes, backspin.
200
kilometers an hour in 6th gear.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
The torque is absolutely phenomenal.
So how do you compare this motorcycle with other big motorcycles like the H2R?
For a start, the H2R is a 1-liter,
Yes.
4-cylinder, but
Yes.
supercharged.
Yes.
So this one is naturally aspirated.
Okay.
If we wanted to put a supercharger on that, maybe we get 500 or 600 horsepower. But I am not interested in supercharging.
Okay.
That's, for me, cheating.
Supercharger is cheating.
Yeah, supercharger and turbo. You know, you take an engine, you bolt it on. Anyone can do that. But to build it from the beginning it takes a little bit more. Don't get me wrong, they are very legitimate way to get horsepower, but it's not really.
Paul knew to get more power, turbocharge or build a mean naturally aspirated engine. And he chose a more interesting path. Together with 3 masters, he creates this productive engine. And as he claims himself, 334 horsepower is not the limit. According to him, you can easily take off 400 from him. And you just listen to this sound.
Yep, that's the sound of a smooth-talking V8. And now a few words about the technical part of the motorcycle. The engine is an 8-cylinder, V-shaped, with a displacement of 1996 cubic centimeters, with 5 valves per cylinder. The crankshaft is made from EN36 steel at high temperature. The engine is equipped with 45mm Mikuni throttle valves. Motec provides the brains and software for this motorcycle. As mentioned, the engine produces 334 horsepower. We're very demanding when it comes to the quality of our products. That's why practically all the parts are made of aluminum, which ensures strength, durability, and high performance. The frame is made of chromoly alloy. Got myself some fancy Marzesini forged aluminum wheels. The bike's appearance is entirely carbon fiber, and ultimately, a fully titanium exhaust system from Akrapovic. All this is to compensate for the relatively heavy B8. The weight of the motorcycle with all fluids and a full tank is 242 kilograms, which is only 26 kilograms more than the H2R. Just a reminder, H2R is a track monster that is not allowed on public roads, while BGM is a representative of the naked class. And yes, comparing them is a thankless task, so to speak, but their technical characteristics are just too close. And when it comes to the question of maximum speed, the manufacturer has a specific slogan in response, which is also a marketing strategy of the company, and it sounds as follows, and I must say it sounds quite good at the very least. And here is what Paul himself says about it.
Okay, so any reports on the top speed figures or something?
Well, once again, this bike is as you can see, is a naked bike.
Okay.
And the problem with naked bike is, of course, that it has a practical top speed because of the wind factor.
Yes.
We are not chasing top speed. We claim that horsepower because that's what it is, and eventually the back wheels just start spinning. So top speed, yeah, if you put a fairing on it, for sure it would do 350 kilometers an hour. There's no reason why not. If you're looking for top speed, there are two things: power to weight ratio and aerodynamics. So, increase the aerodynamics of this machine. The power to weight ratio is already there.
So, it turns out that our hidden antagonist, the H2R Ninja, is not much heavier than its opponent, but on the other hand, it has a higher peak power and significantly greater torque. But here again, it's about the target direction of motorcycles. One is a track sport bike, the other is a purely urban naked, but hardly urban, of course. And the approaches to motorcycle execution are completely different. One was handled by departments, while the other was designed by 4 people. In general, I'll say it again, you can't compare these motorcycles at all. But here's what I personally would look at, and I think you would too, is how fast PGM can go in a high-speed race, naturally with a fairing. So let's keep an eye on the fate of this monster together. Oh yeah, almost forgot. A significant downside of this motorcycle is its price, $180,000 US.
Today in our time, it's unlikely that anyone can be impressed by a big motorcycle engine, but in the 60s, people had a slightly different idea about motorcycles. Half a century ago, a German motorcycle enthusiast would forever change the perception of a powerful and fast bike by building a motorcycle with a car engine, later called the first hyperbike. Meet Friedel Munch and his motorcycle Munch Mammoth. Friedel Munch was born on the 6th of January 1927 in the city of Dorn-Assenheim. Back in his youth, Friedel got into two-wheel technology. Right after finishing school, he starts training as an auto mechanic, and at the age of 17 he was drafted into the army, where he served successfully as a mechanic. After the war, Munch started a small workshop in the basement where he mostly fixed motorcycles. Friedel took on all sorts of models and fixed them up, which basically laid the foundation for future existence. In a well-equipped workshop, they could fix absolutely anything that came their way, and only difficulties with obtaining new spare parts forced the young mechanic to improvise. At the same time, Father Friedel is running the Horax branch in Friedberg. Later, Munch Jr. gets into racing and receives additional education, managing to simultaneously prepare his own hand-tuned 500cc Horax C5 for his first ever race in his life. In spring 1948, he competes in a race at the Hockenheim Ring, demonstrating an average speed of 147 km/h in training races, astonishing everyone. But in the real race, Fridolin has bad luck, and after only a few laps, his motorcycle fails. The engine seized up due to overheating. But Munch persists, works on the design, adds a dry cutter lubrication system to the engine, and names it Preficus, which means sneaky thing in German. But the rivals didn't idle, and now Fridolia's motorcycle needed more power. The old single-cylinder engine no longer satisfied Muncha, so he's developing a new cylinder head with 2 camshafts for the new 500 CEC twin-cylinder engine. Because this car had few similarities with the original Horax engine, he decided to name it the Munch Special. Later, after the crash, Friedel still quits racing and dedicates himself completely to developing and constructing motorcycles. Nevertheless, thanks to the races, people discovered a talented designer. In 1955, there was a little break, after which Friedel gets a position at Horax Company in the racing testing department. But just 6 months later, he quits his job, and a year later, the company stops producing motorcycles and Munch buys up all the production equipment. By the year 1964, Friedel develops an amazing drum brake and sells it with great success to racing teams. A massive 12-inch drum made of a magnesium alloy would instantly stop anything it stood on with just a touch of the hand. An example of a Munch construction on a Norton motorcycle. By 1966, the first prototype of his famous motorcycle, the Munch Mammoth TTS, was already ready. At the start of the project, Friedel planned to build a 4-cylinder engine using 2-cylinder Horax Imperator engines. The idea for this engine came to him at Horax, but in reality, facing difficulties during construction and realizing that a racing engine is unlikely to be suitable for a road motorcycle, Munch rejects Horax and starts looking for a more practical solution, with the main criteria being power, reliability, and ease of repair. And who would have thought but Friedel discovers such a feature in a small German car NSU Prince 1000. By the way, his engine had only 55 horsepower with a working volume of 1 liter, but by putting it in a motorcycle base, Munch got a real hyperbike of that time. The ultimate road motorcycle loaded with cutting-edge electronics and blazingly fast, with an impressive top speed of 225 km/h. In the 1960s, it was simply a legal rocket. Due to its brutal appearance, the bike was instantly nicknamed a mammoth at the presentation. Overall, the bike was very high-tech, but definitely not your average kind. For instance, it took 2 keys to start it. Initially, there was the right one responsible for the headlight, dimensions, and turn signals. The motorcycle started with the left key. This was in the 60s. The motorcycle had such a torque that no wheel could withstand that load. So Friedel developed a rear wheel made of an aluminum alloy with a fancy shape, which later became the motorcycle's trademark. By the way, this was the first production bike with alloy wheels, like the first 4-cylinder motorcycle that appeared long before the inline Japanese ones. The drive chain was well lubricated and enclosed in a sealed housing, which protected it from dirt and water, making motorcycle maintenance easier. To save weight, the frame, contrary to the norms of that time, was made not of steel, but of the same magnesium alloy. Overall, the motorcycle was top-notch and reliable. He not only looked, but also felt like a true German. In the end, he was one of them. But this thing cost a pretty penny. In the 60s, it cost around $4,000, while, for example, Harley-Davidson was priced at about $1,500. And the motorcycle was almost perfect, except for its size and weight. But on the other hand, the bike handled the track perfectly. The long wheelbase, along with the heavy weight, improved the stability of the motorcycle. Also, this bike had rear suspension on it, shocks from Cone, and a front fork from the British Rickman or the Italian Siriani. Ultimately, the 1967 Munch Mammoth TTS motorcycle had an onboard engine. With increased volume up to 1,200 cc,
With 88 GP and later with an upgraded injection, this version delivered a solid 100 horses. For thrill seekers, it was quite a thrill. Versions with 1300 cubic centimeters and even 1400 cubic turbocharged version with a claimed power of 143 horsepower. Despite the success and greatness of the motorcycle, Friedel Munch never managed to establish a serious mass production. He was an outstanding engineer, but not a very adept businessman. Financial challenges were constant companions of Munch, leading him to bankruptcy in 1971. Friedel had to sell off all the rights to his company. Later on, he'll come back with a new project, a 2-liter monster with 260 horsepower. Friedel Munch died in April 2014, having created over 500 versions of his motorcycle throughout his life.
Ich träume und die Welt erzittert.
After the company went bankrupt in 1971, Friedel repeatedly tried to revive production, resulting in the emergence of new motorcycle models. From 73 to 77, Munch produced the Horax 1400 motorcycles, then in 84 the Titan 1600 was born, and already in 1989, after the construction of the Titan 2000, Munch finally decides to permanently retire from motorcycle production. Most likely that's how it would have occurred if not for a man named Thomas Petsch. Thomas was a die-hard fan of Munch's works, keeping an eye on Fred's company's fate, which has experienced both highs and lows after its bankruptcy. The idea of reviving the brand sparks. In his head, he's envisioning a modern motorcycle with all the features of the brute force and grandeur of a classic mammoth. In the summer of 1977, Thomas takes the return flight, where a fine gentleman is seated next to him. In a sincere talk with him, Petsch mentions Munch motorcycles and learns that Friedel Munch is this person's neighbor. And Thomas, without thinking twice, asked him if it was possible to meet up with Friedel. A little later, Thomas gets a call and finds out that Friedel Munch would be happy to meet him. The ultimate result of that fateful and pivotal meeting will be the highly anticipated Munch Mammoth 2000, a groundbreaking innovation in its field. The second Mammoth Muncher, even today after 15 years, simply amazes with its features. A row-mounted turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, built on the basis of a 16-valve cylinder head from Cosworth with a volume of 1998 cubic centimeters, delivers a whopping 260 horsepower and 295 nanometers of torque. And the peak is already reached at 3,000 revolutions per minute. From the start, the peak is reached at just 3,000 revolutions per minute. For comparison, the most powerful sport bike or hyperbike today, the Kawasaki H2R, has 326 horses and 165 Newton-meters of torque in its arsenal. The Triumph Rocket 3 is considered one of the most powerful power cruisers today, with 146 horsepower and 221 Newton-meters of torque. In the 2000s, this beast defeated Hayabusa, but now falls short of expectations. Oh, forget about those production motorcycles. Back in the day, even MotoGP prototypes had less power. And only with the April RC3 Cube in 2002 and its pneumatic timing drive, they reached a level of 260 horsepower. The engine ran smoothly, had a rich sound, started pulling from as low as 1,000 revolutions per minute, and reached a peak value just over 5,000, which is atypical for a motorcycle. But the originality of the solution did not end with the closest engine. The dry weight of the motorcycle was a whopping 354 kilograms. And that's despite the fact that the bike used magnesium alloys and carbon fiber parts. Due to the weight, for better handling and power transmission in the lower part of the motorcycle, right behind the oil pan, there was simply no room for a massive swing arm and a huge exhaust, so a pair of shock absorbers from White Power were installed. Another one of the many exceptional technical solutions in this one-of-a-kind motorcycle. The front suspension consisted of a 43 mm inverted Öhlins fork. All of this power was halted by a set of 320mm brake discs along with two 8-piston calipers in the front and a 280mm brake disc with a 2-piston caliper in the rear, I must emphasize. Taking responsibility for the production of the new Mammoth, Thomas Persch, inspired by the idea of reviving the Munch brand,
created a truly exclusive, incredibly powerful monster that not everyone could handle. The journalists who were lucky enough to test drive this motorcycle had the following to say about it. The engine on this motorcycle is something out of this world. At 3,000 revolutions per minute, the output power is comparable to a meteorite. The performance chart should be like a skyscraper. I was advised to give it full throttle. What? Are you serious? You can most likely completely twist the throttle if you load up on tranquilizers, thoroughly study the motorcycle, and find a wide open space, preferably a straightaway. In the turns, this thing is highly unpredictable. In those days, there were no traction controls to be found. At one point, I thought the clutch was slipping, but it turned out to be the rear 200mm tire. Up until the fourth gear, the motorcycle was leaving black streaks on the asphalt. All this despite the fact that the engine was detuned from 300 horsepower to 260 and limited to a top speed of 250 km per hour, because Pesh figured that would be more than enough. And he did not really make an error. However, as time has demonstrated, the destiny of the initial moment caught up with the second one. Despite Thomas's excitement and enthusiasm for the bike, the production was too unprofitable. The wheel frame, pendulum, clutch, gearbox, everything is designed and built around this turbo monster from Cosworth, which obviously cost a lot, and ultimately led to a price tag of €86,000 in 2002. And later, Petsu will even have to sell several copies at double the price. In the end, in April 2002, a businessman from Würzburg hit the emergency brake and brought production to a halt. A grand total of 15 units were built, out of which 8 were sold. The remaining 7 units stayed in the possession of Thomas Picha. But despite the failures, the motorcycles of Great Munch deserve our attention no less than other rare and exotic motorcycles on our channel.
Conservatism is highly developed in the two-wheeled world, and anything that disrupts established stereotypes in motorcycle construction is sure to receive a certain amount of attention, as such occurrences are quite rare. And actually, there are a bunch of ways to build a motorcycle that's not like that. Can you redesign the suspension like the Honda Elf, the chassis like the Alligator Gordy, or approach the issue thoroughly and build something like the Ducati Elanor, Neander, or Drysdale engines? The Super 32 Rovesio, built by the tiny Roman manufacturer Nimbo Motorociclette, is exactly that kind of iconoclastic machine. This motorcycle completely overturns the engine design, flipping it upside down because the designer, Daniel Sabatini, firmly believed that he could construct a superior motor by turning it on its head. In inverted engines, where the crankshaft is located above the cylinders, there's nothing new. In piston aircraft, inverted engines were used for the majority of the century. By placing cylinders and heads under crankcase, you can raise attachment point of propeller, achieving advantageous aerodynamic shape for aircraft, better visibility for pilot, and convenience for maintenance. You also significantly shift the center of gravity, which helps in control, for example, with combat aircraft. On two-wheeled, such a power unit has only been installed once before. A flipped inline 4-cylinder engine with a displacement of 600 cubic centimeters was built as a prototype by the French company MGC in 1939. He conquered the creepy 666 kilometers of trials with a stroller before he was put on ice. Well, the truth is, history got involved in the mix. The start of World War II put a halt to the project, never to be resumed again. Building an upside-down engine ain't as easy as flipping an existing one. To keep the engine lubricated, a number of modifications are required. All inverted engines must have a dry sump design, where the oil is stored in a separate tank and supplied to key lubrication points. In the key areas of the engine, you gotta have a few oil catch cans to remove the oil without letting it build up. Some old radial engines need to be checked and have the oil drained from the lower cylinders before starting, because the oil seeps through the pistons. Otherwise, you're gonna blow up the engine. So, having an upside-down engine makes sense in an airplane design, but why would you use it in a motorcycle? According to Sabatini, there are two reasons: functional and aesthetic. motorcycle frames. This tough part is the core of the whole shebang. If you are using a motor as a stressed element, you usually want to attach the chassis directly to the engine. The Sabatini tried to maximize its concept. With the crankcase on top, he used the inherent rigidity of the crankcase and built a minimal frame around it, reducing the weight of the structure. He also wanted to radically shift the center of gravity. Contrary to popular belief, an extremely low center of gravity is not ideal, and today's thought boils down to mass centralization. Daniel thinks that all masses, including motorcyclists, should fit into a small circle. The smaller this circle, the better. An additional positive effect is that the cylinders located at the bottom are better cooled by the airflow. And secondly, aesthetics. Sabatini complained that the classic beauty of an open-air cooled engine has disappeared in favor of closed constructions with liquid cooling. So, the Nimbo engine is designed to possess air cooling and an aesthetically pleasing appearance. This aesthetic aspiration extends to the design of the motorcycle itself. Only a naked roadster can satisfy a dog's desire for classic mechanical beauty with its unusual engine as the central element. For practical reasons, once again, it is lighter and much more comfortable for the driver, not so hot. The advanced engine design with high performance is clearly not the main focus here. In addition to air oil cooling, the Nimbo engine is an inline 3-cylinder with one, in parentheses, lower camshaft and 2 valves per cylinder. Fuel injection through a large intake chamber with a single throttle body, similar to that of a car engine, instead of separate throttle valves, which you usually find in most performance-oriented motorcycle engines. The cylinder heads are not only flipped and facing downwards, but also have an intake exhaust system that differs from the traditional motorcycle design. Intake at front, exhaust at back. The large timing chain cover on left side resembles inverted AGS 7R engine. The goal is not maximum power at high revs, but a wide, useful power range for everyday driving. The engine delivers a massive amount of power in all directions simply because it's huge. During development, 3 engine options were announced. With 1814 cubic centimeters, 160 horsepower, and 165 newton meters of torque, 1925 cc, 200 horsepower, 210 newton meters of torque, 2097 cc engine, 250 horsepower, 255 nanometers torque, Triumph Rocket 3, 2294 cc, about 145 horsepower, over 220 nanometers for reference. But the Triumph weighs 317 kilograms dry, while the Nimbus weighs only 150 kilograms. Wow, that's incredible! You can't deny the visual appeal of the engine design, and it's nice to see someone intentionally creating a beautiful engine. The project started in 2009 and went online in 2010, with photos of a finished engine on a test stand, accompanied by a press release and specifications from Sabatini, which detailed the philosophy and technical data of his new engine, which he named 32 Revisio, 3 cylinders, 2 liters reverse. The crowd was impressed but had a skeptical attitude. Only a few individuals outside the aviation sector were acquainted with inverted engines and questioned their feasibility. Other skeptics claimed that it might work, but it guzzles oil at an unbelievable rate and doesn't offer any advantages over a regular engine. Most individuals questioned the anticipated power and weight attributes, which ultimately proved to be optimistic, if not unbelievable, for an engine that is cooled by air. The criticism disappeared when photos of the complete prototype were shown a few months later. The motorcycle looked menacing, with carbon fiber body elements and a massive engine that dominated the design. Up front was a regular suspension with an upside-down fork at 50mm, and strangely enough, the only brake is Brembo. The rear suspension, a springless air shock absorber, was installed, similar to the Virus and Bimota TC2D, attached to a swing arm with a box-shaped section made of carbon fiber. The frame was made up of 2 steel lattice subframes, bolted to both ends of the crankcase. The main bulk of the frame is basically the engine, with the least amount of subframes for seating and steering column. The prototype was photographed in front of the radial air-cooled engine. The critics ultimately quieted down in the month of July in the year 2011 when Nimbo showed up on the Francocorta track for the purpose of testing. A bright and beautiful Italian prototype came to life in the paddock with its unique sound. At full throttle, it made the distinctive mechanical sound of a British 3, but under load it sounded like a low-flying plane. The test driver praised the unusual design, noting excellent handling, wide power range, and absolutely magnificent sound. Based on the looks, the little rascal wasn't just an empty sound. Proof was tearing up the track, attracting curious spectators to the pit lane. The engine dominates the design and seems massive compared to other components. The pendulum is pretty long compared to the rest of the structure and is mounted high in the engine compartment due to the inverted layout. The intermediate shaft star is installed, positioned at knee level due to the gearbox being placed above the engine. The concealed frame and minimalistic appearance contribute to this utterly brutal design, as does the small suspension and seat, which are positioned high above the rear wheel. Some compared him to cafe racers, but what we have here is a badass custom-built street fighter. Despite being on his first trip on the track, Nimbo didn't think of himself as a racing motorcycle. He was designed to be a high-performance street motorcycle that was supposed to be custom-built. At least that's how it was planned in 2011. Ever since then, there have been few updates from the company and their website isn't working. But the official Facebook community hints at speed records and an updated design, which means work is underway. Two prototypes were built from open sources. 1,800 cubic, nicknamed Custer, black prototype made of carbon fiber and Pollux, red example in honor of the Dioscuri twins from Greek mythology. Prototype 002 Pollux was sold for some time at an undisclosed price. After the sale, mass production was supposed to begin. The production version should be equipped with a 1925 cubic centimeter engine. The declared power remains at 200 horsepower and 210 Newton meters of torque. Sabatini notes that the two existing prototypes are well built, but over the years, significant changes have been made to the engine design, and the production engine will be greatly improved. There were also plans to develop a racing version for the company on the Isle of Man. According to the latest news, the developers have announced a fundraising campaign on the crowdfunding platform Indiegogo. To establish production, they require 3.2 million euros, and the anticipated bike price is approximately $68,000. The most interesting thing is that in the initial press release, Nimbo is described as the most expensive road motorcycle in the world, and Sabatini confirmed that the production version was supposed to cost around 300,000 euros per unit. Excessively, of course, but keep in mind, you ain't paying for a motorcycle that uses an existing engine. The Nimbo engine is 100% unique, and a high price is necessary to offset the huge costs of designing and building the engine on our own, without the support of major manufacturers. Is a weird offshoot on the motorcycle evolution tree. The advantage of this design is offset by the additional complexity of designing the engine from scratch. But if Nimbo used the same engine concept in a regular layout, we probably wouldn't be discussing this today, and Super 32 would have become an obscure project. Instead, he captured the imagination of the curious public and pissed off a bunch of critics. According to the press release from Nimbo, their online advertising was all word of mouth and came from various blogs and forums. Nimbo is a kind of technological experiment, which is a refreshing form of entertainment, an exercise in pure engineering creativity, driven by passion and a strong desire to do something different. True innovations in motorcycle design are a rare occurrence, but Sabatini created a machine that really stands out. Consequently, we obtained one of the most exclusive motorcycles globally, featuring a unique concept that completely redefines the traditional design. Innovator Robert Horn has spent several decades developing a series of machines that redefine the concept of a motorcycle. They combine alternative suspension with implementing control of both wheels in an absolutely ruthless format of a lying chassis. Robert named his creation Rohorn, and it's definitely the most fascinating invention in the world of two-wheeled vehicles in the last 20 years. Robert thinks the vast majority of representatives in the motorcycle industry are terribly boring and devoid of enthusiasm. Check out any of the websites dedicated to motorcycle art and tire yourself to death with endless images of dystopian cafe racers. He genuinely doesn't understand why it's exciting, appealing, or remotely interesting for many people. According to Horn, if modern engineers were to design motorcycles for the first time, they would look completely different, with much better aerodynamics, comfort, and chassis than motorcycles based on 19th century configurations. The only hint of such possibilities were Nessie by Midden Tompkinson and Quasar Newell, although at the time they turned out to be terribly ugly, heavy, and flawed. And Robert also believed that no reconfiguration of components would alter the fact that motorcycles operating at the maximum of their capabilities transform into unicycles. The sole method to substantially enhance productivity is to consistently utilize both tires, that is, augment the wheelbase and manage both wheels. It refers to a subclass of motorcycles called fits forwards, where the driver's legs are positioned forward. Seemed like contradictory contraptions that old folks with a personality disorder usually rode on, no matter how harsh it may sound. But one day in a bike shop, his attention was drawn to a bicycle with a long wheelbase and an aerodynamic yet comfortable seating position that solved many problems. The perfect setup. Soon Robert built a test version of a similar bicycle with an electric motor. The most interesting and unusual thing about it was the steering control. It was done in the form of a fighter jet's control stick. And here it is worth explaining this decision by Robert's love for airplanes. Building an airplane at home is an impossible task, at least from a financial point of view. The money question for motorcycles is much more forgiving, and aviation has a lot in common with two-wheeled vehicles for a long time. Everyone knows the story of US bikers, who, among other things, emerged because it seems that only a motorcycle could give ex-pilots a similar feeling to flying. So Robert got into two-wheelers full-time, where his ideas once again strongly resonated with his love for winged creatures. In the new Horn project, tilting the steering wheel left made the front wheel turn right, causing the motorcycle to lean left. This is simply fundamental control in action. However, Robert had to do a considerable amount of relearning before he could relax while driving. The steering wheel was almost always in one-direction wheel control mode. The only time he switched to the opposite mode was in situations of a sharp turn or U-turn at a very low speed. And the biggest surprise was the simple movement along a fixed course with different gear ratios of the rear steering control. The more both ends turn in the same direction, the smaller the angle of inclination, what none of the steering control theorists ever predicted. Although the two-axis joystick was priceless for testing, it was actually not a viable motorcycle control system. Ever since, the project has served as a lovely centerpiece in the Horn's living room. Later on, there still wasn't a budget to build a full-size electric racing bike. But by then, the failed obsession with GoPed had reached its peak. For their 23 cubic engines, various cheap odds and ends were available, and there was a local racing series held in the big hotel parking lots around Denver and other locations. That is the reason why they constructed and tested an extremely low-lying racing GoPed called 2WS. The steering gear ratio of 2:1 significantly reduced the angles of inclination, making the ride stiff and slippery. Horn believed he could make and sell ram kits without major issues. A humble start in sports, but a great way to introduce the world to 2WS concept and the opportunity to grow into something bigger. The Cycle World magazine even showed interest in both the racing 2WS GoPad and the electric experimental motorcycle 2WS. But it turned out that the articles were written just to be preserved, because soon the widespread fascination with GoPad collapsed, taking with it the racing series and the secondary market. Robert's motorcycle spent the next few years hanging over his desk, what has already grown into some kind of fetish. Then it became a depressing reminder of what was not. The budget was zero once again, but low-interest credit cards were easy to obtain at that particular time. It would be dumb not to continue, jumping into this wide-open window of opportunities. So, a full-fledged motorcycle was developed to be very cheap and easy to assemble. And now, as a power unit, he used an engine from a Kawasaki EX500 donor, again due to its cheapness. It was built in a barn using square and rectangular steel pipes. It didn't need any fancy frame equipment. Absolute geometric precision. All of the welds were performed on an adorable little machine and required no effort at all. The processing was carried out using a small, affordable combo machine. It was very slow, but accomplished a lot of valuable stuff. The cladding was also kept as simple as possible, trying not to look excessively ugly. The parts that could have been significantly lightened were not lightened, regardless of the lightweight of racing vehicle parts. extra work hours postponed the answer to the most crucial question. Will he even work at all? But he made it. The local MRA club and the local High Plains Raceway allowed Robert to participate in the races. And although the motorcycle didn't turn out to be competitive, competing in a racing environment provided much more valuable experience than just renting a track and rushing on the next lap. Real races on a real racetrack stimulate thinking that cannot be simulated. Creating a motorcycle is undoubtedly the most interesting part, but if you're not willing to go all out and pit it against the racing world, then you're not really proving anything. John Britton. After the final race, he was supposed to become an additional decoration for the living room, but then Horn got the opportunity to showcase it at an event, which sounded like a good excuse to take it out one last time. The event itself was a blast. Robert received favorable feedback from some rider enthusiasts and encountered numerous fascinating individuals. After 25 years of dreaming about a revolutionary racing electric bike, it's time to wake up and make it a reality. At least that's what Horn was told. While he truly wants to join electric bike races, which he has in mind, his next project will once more have an internal combustion engine for the same reasons. Cost. As long as he's using his available credit and not someone's big bag of cash, gasoline will still be the only solution. This new form needs to be a full-fledged concept, not just a bunch of minor improvements. It's hard to prove the advantages of wings by attaching them to a frog. They really work best on birds. The transition from frog to bird is usually too radical a step for conservative business corporations that have invested too much money in producing the best frogs. So these new concepts come from crazy enthusiasts, many of whom seem to just like change for the sake of change. Due to this, they have the potential to make errors that can make even their most excellent concepts appear absurd. But these ideas just have to wait until traditional thinking completely goes belly up. Then these ideas gain wide popularity and acquire the label of progress. Ridiculously ugly, ridiculously huge, but at the same time super reliable motorcycle with a car engine was able to travel 400,000 kilometers without major repairs. In the past, he saved the Brazilian market for two-wheel tech, becoming an icon. Amazon S1600, a unique product of desperate ingenuity. Looking at the photos of the Amazonas, it's hard to believe that this beast is a fully functional production motorcycle that regular folks can ride. Even upon initial observation, it appears to be terrifyingly enormous and incomplete. Furthermore, when a relatively small rider perches atop this towering peak, it becomes even more absurd. Seems like this here is an illegally born child of a Honda Goldwing and Boss hose, and such a little thing that gives off a discouraging impression is formed even before you throw your leg over this damn thing. And yet, Amazonas is a serial motorcycle that is popular among devoted fans, known for its incredible reliability and durability. That was the choice of the Brazilian police to replace their aging Harley-Davidson fleet. It was a product of ingenuity and backyard work during tough times. And he survived his humble beginnings to become an icon in South America. The Amazons arose as a result of some really specific circumstances that happened in Brazil in the 70s. The economic failure and tough protectionist policy meant that imported goods were forgotten, which effectively hindered the import of motorcycles and spare parts for their maintenance. This import substitution industrialization policy was aimed at stimulating local production and was in effect until the 90s, making Brazil a technological backwater. At that time, the Brazilian police had a park full of outdated Harleys that quickly became useless, and without domestic motorcycle production, the corteges had no chance of getting something updated. Master from São Paulo, Daniel Rodrigues, noticed the gap and designed a motorcycle for the police's needs. Since Volkswagen has been producing the Beetle model in Brazil since the 1950s, it made sense to use Volkswagen parts. Anyway, according to Rodrigues, he began constructing a huge tourist machine relying on the engine and transmission of the Volkswagen Beetle with a power unit of 1600 cubic centimeters and air cooling. In '77, the mighty Amazon came crashing down on an unsuspecting world. The engine was stock from the Brazilian production, a 4-cylinder with 1,584 cc displacement. Compression ratio of 7.2 to 1, no exotic features. Standard models had only one carburetor for Ford Escort, installed inside and divided between 2 rows of cylinders. You have already had a couple of carburetors on the Super eSport.
but none of the versions offered particularly high performance. Supposedly, some models were available with a 1.3-liter engine that produced 38 horsepower. On the other hand, he had a decent torque, and that would be a decent advantage if the beast didn't weigh 400 kilograms with a full tank of gasoline. All the components on Amazons were the result of scarce resources. The disc brakes were taken off the Ford car, and the master cylinder was modified to be controlled from the steering wheel. We kept the stock 4-speed transmission from Volkswagen, complete with a working reverse gear. It was necessary given the motorcycle's weight. The main transmission was adapted to the chain by welding differential gears and setting the star in motion with one of the half axles. The suspension was designed by Rodriguez, and it just couldn't handle the front task at all. The frame was a rough construction made of duplex pipes, which did not take into account the possibility of using the engine as a load-bearing element. Different parts were put together pretty roughly. Despite the rough quality of the finished product, the Amazons were accepted and became the preferred option for the Brazilian police in the 80s. Not that they had a big range, of course. Amazing. But despite being made in the backyard, Amazonas proved to be surprisingly sturdy. Motorcycles used for patrol have an impressive fuel efficiency with minimal need for maintenance. And in case of any issues, any mechanic can easily repair a motorcycle. Some of these bad boys were hitting the 400,000 kilometer mark before needing an engine replacement, can you believe it? How long do the most reliable motorcycle models last? Drop a comment. Seems like the VFR 800 can go for $250,000. Videos show Italian's BMW K1200S mileage as 300, but here it's 400k. Emilio Scott, an Argentine traveler, rode the longest on a Honda Goldwing 1100, covering 735 km in 10 years. I drove the same distance. He burned 47,000 liters of gasoline, wore out 86 tires and 9 seats, and only replaced the engine once. On average, it's about 367,000 kilometers per engine, which still ain't enough to beat the Amazons. Now that's where the car engine really showed its stuff. In Brazil, the Amazon has remained truly iconic. In the mid-80s, at the peak of production, there were 4 main models available. Basic exports, sports super exports, packed into tourism trunks and government policy. Production was growing, and Amazons was gaining devoted fans and hungry Brazilian bikers who had nothing to choose from in their tightly restricted market. Roughly a quarter of the production was dedicated to utility models. The rest was sold to the public. There were even a few instances exported to other countries. And jokingly but ironically, Senor Rodriguez's creation turned out to be so reliable that it almost pushed him out of the domestic market. Nobody was buying my motorcycles. The company had to focus on the US market. But outside the country, this strange animal was a curiosity. They often made fun of it as the ugliest motorcycle in the world and probably one of the worst to ride on. Polite restraint was quite the topic even on the pages of Cycle World at that time. I get it, riding on the Amazon Oze was awful. Slow, heavy, with crappy brakes, clumsy controls, square tires and non-existent suspension. It was a catastrophe for anyone acquainted with contemporary motorcycles. The sole accomplishment of Americans was constructing dragsters derived from Amazons. For instance, David Edwards significantly altered the standard Beetle engine, raising the displacement to 2275 cubic centimeters and extracting triple the power, 150 horsepower. A 400-pound Amazon flew a quarter mile in 13 seconds at an exit speed of 165 kilometers per hour. The real revenge of Amazons for all the mockery, or not. In the early 90s, the original 1600 started to die out on the market, and a more modern replacement was needed. Or maybe someone just figured that a modernized Amazons is just necessary and began constructing it. The result was a slightly less disgusting but practically unknown Ecohena 1600. Except for a few ads and some lists of used motorcycles in Brazil, there is almost no information about Ecohene. After import restrictions were loosened and modern motorcycles became available in the 1990s, Amazons dissolved into obscurity. He is remembered by owners and semi-crazy enthusiasts, as well as old-timers who recall hearing about a strange motorcycle from South America with a flat 4 from Volkswagen. Today, no list of the weirdest, ugliest and most horrible motorcycles would be complete without the mighty Amazonas 1600. In the early 21st century, motorcycle makers started testing diesel engines for their enhanced reliability, fuel efficiency, and incredible torque. A small Dutch company decides to create a motorcycle based on a 3-cylinder turbo diesel from Volkswagen Lupo, and it was a completely new perspective on a diesel motorcycle compared to any other presented before it, simply because essentially, in terms of dimensions and weight, it is a true sport bike, but with torque figures higher than those of the Triumph Rocket 3. The Thunderstar motorcycle project was initiated by Star Twin co-owner Kees van der Star, who had been observing the production of diesel motorcycles for many years with some dissatisfaction, knowing that new diesel engine developments in the automotive industry could be just as suitable, if not better, for motorcycles than a regular gasoline engine. Diesel motorcycles of the early 2000s, such as Neander and Track Diesel, were very promising projects with huge potential, ready to enter the market. Over time, some of them could indeed be legally acquired, but they did not gain widespread popularity due to either their outdated nature, where such an engine was impractical, or conversely due to excessive complexity in design, making the production of such motorcycles prohibitively expensive. Star Twin's plan and proposal involved an automotive-oriented, already geared towards mass production, technologically advanced 3-cylinder turbo diesel. It was later recognized as the most eco-friendly globally, with a fuel consumption of just 3 liters per 100 kilometers. Secondly, unlike their competitors, Star Twin began designing a sports motorcycle, attributing this to the complexity of developing sport bikes. Converting a sport motorcycle to a touring or road one is easier than vice versa. Based on this logic, Thunderstar invited Jeroen Bernard to collaborate in designing the motorcycle. He designed the motorcycle entirely in 3D before starting its assembly in 2005. In the same year, Star Twin unveiled a fully assembled motorcycle at the Motorai Motorcycle Show event in Amsterdam. By the way, Star Twin is the oldest Ducati dealer in the Netherlands, which celebrated its 40th anniversary in 2019. Its name may be linked to the Ducati engine's legend, or it could be a playful reference to the owner's surname, the Van der Star brothers Kees and Hans. Thanks to the smart use of lightweight components and economical design, the Thunderstar 1200 TDI weighs only 205 kilograms. Almost everything you see with the naked eye is designed by us, says Star Twin's Jeroen Bernard. We employed different elements from automobiles and motorcycles. We fabricated car parts to be lighter and enhance the strength of motorcycle parts. Undoubtedly, the top question authors of diesel sport bikes are asked to this day is about the power unit it possesses. The stock engine of the Volkswagen Lupo has a displacement of 1200 cubic centimeters and delivers 61 horsepower. Like all advanced diesel engines of that time, it can boast direct injection, a turbocharger, and an intercooler. At the initial stages, the engine power in the motorcycle had already been increased to 70 horsepower. Later, gradually, they increased the power to 100 horsepower and the torque to an unprecedented 250 for a motorcycle. They gradually raised it to observe and analyze how such a locomotive movement would impact the 5-speed transmission system over time and overall on the motorcycle's design. By the way, the transmission was borrowed from the FJ 1200. In addition, Thunderbike is also equipped with quite decent components. Many parts are manufactured in the Netherlands, says Bernard. We used a top-of-the-line fork and rear shock absorber from White Power. Both are very lightweight. For example, the front fork tubes are constructed using aluminum. The brakes have been sourced from the British PFM Performance, showcasing ultralight brake discs and radial calipers, in addition to carbon wheels provided by Blackstone Technology. But how does such an exotic vehicle ride, sound and feel overall? The manufacturer responds as follows. Thunderstar rides just like a gasoline-powered sport bike, except of course for the enormous torque. And this is on any gear. This means that you absolutely don't care which gear you're in, because it accelerates quite strongly on each one. Plus, it has a unique sound and you can experience it right now. The production of this sport bike was not planned to be launched into mass production, but the manufacturer did not rule out collaborating with other companies. At that time, StarTwin's maximum ambition was to produce only a small batch of motorcycles. According to the creator of Thunderstar, it is a real prototype and was designed accordingly. For example, a new casting method was used for manufacturing the engine casing. Today, an exclusive diesel sport bike can only be found at small moto events. Little is known about its current fate, as well as the cost of producing such motorcycles. And even in our days, it can be confidently stated that a diesel motorcycle is a relic of the past. However, 15 to 20 years ago, the concept proposed by StarTwin appeared to be very promising. A sport tourer with such an economical and practical heart could and should have occupied its niche, and such vehicles would probably have been on the roads for a very long time. The only significant downside of Thunderstar is its vibration. The motorcycle, which was made as a tribute to the great Barry Sheene by individuals from his close circle, built entirely by hand from exclusive components to become the most powerful and fastest road motorcycle of its time. He is just as charismatic and unique as his mentor, Icon Sheene, a two-wheeled masterpiece, a true work of art.
Get away from me!
Barry Sheene was unquestionably an attractive individual and an exceedingly colourful racer, a showman through and through, I would confidently venture to say. His thrilling driving style brought him fame and world champion titles in 1976 to 77. A huge talent as soon as he got behind the motorcycle wheel. Bold and decisive in actions, this wizard is also irresistibly daring yet cheerful, never appearing in public without a smile on their face. He always did his job in his own style and always with immense passion. This explosive cocktail didn't leave fans, girls, and especially those who knew Barry personally or worked closely with him, indifferent. It was a group of around 20 people who collaborated with Sheene at the height of his skill and chose to immortalize the greatness of their beloved racer and comrade in a motorcycle, with each design element being a meaningful reference. Andrew Morris, perhaps the most devoted fan of Barry Sheene and founder of Icon, became the main initiator of this project. He didn't just name this motorcycle with the word Sheene. Andrew assembled a team of 18 people who played a significant role in Barry's career. Each of these individuals, in some way, is indirectly involved in Sheen's peak victories during his brilliant career. An elegant aluminum frame, for example, was designed by Stuart Tiller, the man who built the first racing frame for Barry, a fairly well-known frame manufacturer. And the beloved brakemaster Aki Raisin from ISR Brakes created a system with enough power to stop a 200-kilogram motorcycle traveling at 320 kilometers per hour. The unique color scheme of the motorcycle was conceived by Mike Fairholm, who created unique helmet designs for Barry, such as the personalized helmet featuring a Donald Duck illustration. By the way, this logo was a true talisman for Sheen. Of course, he also found a place on the motorcycle. The uniquely aggressive and somewhat futuristic look of the motorcycle, by the standards of the late 2000s, was designed by Morris himself, who studied art before becoming a prominent businessman in shipping. Made entirely of carbon fiber, just like the motorcycle's wheels. Morris tried to create an image of a muscular superbike with features of a British bulldog, as he himself says. In addition, only the best engineers worked on the motorcycle. For instance, the motorcycle's suspension was also made of high-quality racing components from Bitubo, while the exclusive control unit from Motec had full data logging capabilities and the ability to create custom fuel maps. The exhaust is a completely handmade piece made of stainless steel, just like the tank, which takes a whole month to manufacture. Or like the PID made of polished aluminum with a digital multifunction display. Or a unique aluminum swing arm and a seat made of Alcantara with the raised number 7 with Barry's lucky number. Barry's best friend and former Suzuki teammate Steve Berish consulted on the project throughout the entire construction process. It was he who suggested installing an engine from the Suzuki GSX 1400 as the power unit. Why Suzuki and why this engine specifically? There are two reasons for this. First and foremost, it is that Barry Sheen achieved success precisely with a team originating from Hamamatsu. Secondly, this superbike required an Ultra engine, which they were intending to equip with something that began to appear on Japanese motorcycles back when Barry Sheen was retiring from racing. With a turbine, with a hybrid Garrett turbine and a custom-made blow-off valve as claimed in the sources. The GSX 1400 engine was the best fit for this. All the engine internals were replaced with parts from suppliers well known to successful racing teams around the world. The boost pressure was around 0.4 bars, but you always have a boost controller at hand. 257 GP obtained from engine power-to-weight ratio of 1250 horsepower per ton. Exceeds expectation?
Look at the immense power, a few tentative wheelers, 52 of them. To say it's one of its kind is an understatement. At Molecombe, again past the straw bales.
But perhaps the most important thing the motorcycle received was the support of Barry's family. His widow Stephanie signed the handlebar cross next to Barry's signature and silver coins with an image of Donald Duck, handmade in Switzerland. Freddie's son became the first test pilot of the Icon. The motorcycle was ready and first rode at the annual Goodwood Festival of Speed in 2010. Freddie Sheen drove. It took 4 years to develop it, and each motorcycle is hand-built over a period of 3 months. As Andrew Morris himself says, the idea was to create a continuation of the legendary name. And that's why each major component has a direct connection to the tire, which by the way was a brilliant engineer itself. From the very beginning, it was decided that it should be a completely new motorcycle of British construction, not just a copy of what Barry rode. It had to have characteristics that would allow it to ride comfortably on roads and, if desired, test the track. Its creation turned out to be extremely costly, and I don't consider it a profitable business, says Morris. I truly desire individuals who purchase them to use them, not to preserve them on a pedestal solely as investments. Every Icon Sheen is sold with a promise of exclusive service. The handover to the client will be personally conducted by Parish, and irrespective of the buyer's country of residence, Morris guarantees that there will be a fully trained local engineer ready to provide service and troubleshoot issues. In terms of behavior, the motorcycle is friendlier than expected from a turbocharged engine. Due to its 200 kilograms weight, the motorcycle lacks agility. there is a slight turbo lag at the bottom of the tachometer, followed by a significant pickup, and by 9,000, the engine fades. The best option is a range of 4,000 to 8,000 revolutions per minute. Easy to handle, not a liter bike, but highly nimble and maneuverable. The components utilized from renowned manufacturers operate at a 100% level of performance. Barry Machine Sheen will always be remembered by fans as a key promoter of motorcycle racing worldwide. Falling in love with his charisma in this thrilling and spectacular sport, he experienced several stunning accidents in his life and, despite the most severe injuries, always said, "No matter what, I'm okay." But sadly, he died of cancer in 2003 at the age of 52. The production should aim to manufacture precisely this quantity of Icon Sheen motorcycles. Every motorcycle will be accompanied by a distinctive playing card, which will be hand-drawn by Mike Fairhelm and will showcase a girl wearing a bikini. All this pleasure can be obtained in exchange for a sum of $160,000. Exact motorcycle production numbers and current fate remain unknown at this time, lacking available information. Seemingly a typical showstopper, a toy for wealthy collectors, but how many amazing details are hidden behind the story of its creation? Andrew and his team attempted to construct a motorbike that would mirror Barry's personality, this charismatic extrovert. Maybe not the finest motorcycle on the planet, but it is certainly a genuine homage to a legend such as Barry Sheen. A British enthusiast named Simon Whitlock constructed a 48-cylinder engine with a combined volume of 4,200 cubic centimeters, earning a place in the Guinness Book of Records. What's the deal with 48 cylinders? These are 6 inline 8s combined into one engine. To start, you need a separate engine with a volume of 125 cc. Honda lead engine simply doesn't achieve it. You can only discover how this thing was constructed and how it operates on the channel. Simon Whitlock was building exclusive motorcycles long before his main project. It all started in the mid-80s, with the popular among customizers and affordable at that time Kawasaki 3-cylinder 2-stroke motorcycles, the appearance of which Simon himself really liked. In '87 he built a straight 4 based on them, after which there were projects with straight 7s and triple triples, as Whitlock himself calls them. In such trios there were already 9 cylinders, and there was also a mention of the original Kawasaki H2R. So gradually he came up with the project of a monstrous 48-cylinder motorcycle. The motorcycle was called Tinker Toy to pay tribute to the Boeing B-17 heavy bomber used during World War II. These flying fortresses were usually given names, and the B-17 had the name Tinker Toy. As Whitlock himself says, a motorcycle isn't for speed or power. He was built with one goal: to make it into the Guinness Book of Records. The total volume of such a giant turned out to be an impressive 4,200 cubic centimeters. According to Simon's assumptions, his motorcycle is capable of reaching a top speed of about 200 kilometers per h. Volkswagen appears to have a fondness for unique engine setups in their high-end vehicles, but this particular one surpasses any engine from the Volkswagen Auto Group. The cylinders for the project were borrowed from the Kawasaki KH250, which was the most popular of the legendary triples, so there shouldn't be any problems with spare parts and their cost.
18th of April 1999. We're going to give it a whiz. I don't know if it will start, we'll soon find out.
Any new engine can be difficult to start, and of course when you've built it you never know if it's going to start. Once I put my hand over the back of the car to pull some fuel through, then the engine was fine. System proved as working, revved very well, and we could then move to the next stage of building the other 5 engines.
During the construction, Simon accumulated a whole collection of KH250 engines, which he bought all over the UK. These engines were stripped of their gearboxes, ground down and welded together. The entire engine exhaust system is handmade. This is an incredible 24-in-1 scheme, where stainless steel pipes are connected to empty 4-stroke mufflers. As soon as the basic 8-cylinder engine is assembled and a homemade exhaust manifold is already installed on it, the next step is the engine intake. He assembled from copper plumbing pipes and secured by modifying KX 250 engine parts, and he did it 6 times. Jewelry work. Then there was the assembly of all 6 parts into one, measuring the finished engine to make a suitable frame for it, and the friendship of all this with the BMW transmission. By the way, the engine was 750 mm tall and 600 mm wide. After assembling it into a single structure, a gear mechanism was designed and created using a wooden prototype, which connects 6 engines and transfers power to the transmission. After practically all the main components were assembled, the next step was ignition, which consisted of 6 Jaguar E-type spark plugs and the installation of 6 Mikuni carburetors. The gas handle was borrowed from the older 500 lip model, cause it was way stronger. Later on it will be carved out of a solid piece of aluminum. September 2002, test launches to check the auxiliary engine. As a starter, a Honda Melody engine is currently installed in the frame, which ultimately couldn't properly rotate 48 cylinders just to simply pump enough fuel and air through the large carburetors. Later, Honda Lead engine managed it, but ultimately a 125cc 2-stroke engine was fitted on the motorcycle from the Italian Piaggio. Yeah, in reality, the motorcycle is even a 49-cylinder one. Since there was simply no room for the main fuel tank on the motorcycle, Simon came up with a very unusual solution. Between the 8-cylinder engines, in a manner of speaking, there existed a vacant area where he positioned a self-made tank constructed from plumbing pipe made of stainless steel. The fakeback, made from 2 parts of the KH 250, covers the ignition system, the gas cable to the 6 carburetors, as well as a small fuel tank necessary for the additional engine that serves as a starter. There's also a small water cooling system there, designed to dissipate heat from repeated launches at exhibitions. Simon also handcrafted all the wiring and electronics. I've got a small car generator from a Ford Mondeo and a fuel pump installed on my motorcycle, providing the necessary fuel pressure. As already mentioned, Whitelock used a box from a BMW motorcycle with standard, albeit slightly modified controls, footrests, and a drive shaft. Front suspension, brakes and wheels from Honda Goldwing. To handle 600 kilograms, fork equipped with springs for strength and stability. And the wheels were modified by Scottish craftsmen for added durability. Overall, almost the entire front part is from the Goldwing, except for the instruments. They're all from the same KH 250. I got the rear shocks from Harley-Davidson. Underneath a pretty standard seat made of sheet metal, there's a hidden battery, and that very small 2-stroke 125cc engine starter from an Italian scooter. The tail section is also from the KH 250, slightly widened to match the motorcycle frame. Starting up this 2-wheeled wonder is pretty interesting. After turning the ignition key, you first need to turn on the ignition switch for the small engine and start it with the red button. Then when the main engine starts, you need to turn off the switch. The best part is that this beast of a job is really smooth. You know, the more cylinders, the smoother the operation. But you gotta be real careful with this thing, cause if it falls on your foot, chances are you're gonna lose it. 600 kilograms no less.
I've started it on numerous occasions. It's a little bit tricky to ride, but before we brought it here to this museum, its final resting place for now, I did ride it. If anybody wanted to make me a serious offer on this bike, personally I don't want to sell it. The money's not important, but if £500,000 turned up, I could be persuaded. Don't tell the wife.
In daily life, Simon supervises the construction of malls, and an engineering warehouse of the mind allows you to blow off steam in your free time in such an unusual and amazing way. You probably remember that old video with that motorcycle, watching which was hard to believe in its reality. That video held the title of the most watched video on YouTube featuring a motorcycle for a long time. By the way, this video currently has a total of 20 million views. Now you know the story of a motorcycle that went into the Guinness Book of Records as a vehicle with the most cylinders in the engine. This motorcycle features an American-made V-twin engine, advanced chassis, high-quality components, original sporty style, and impressive characteristics. It was constructed by an intelligent American engineer who was working autonomously to implement his own concepts in order to produce an impeccable sport bike made in America. Royer is a US example of exoticism, developed by an engineer from Illinois named Walter Rarick. Built on a Harley-Davidson power unit and providing top-notch components and exclusive hand assembly, the Superbike Royer was designed to be a highly anticipated contender for the United States in the exclusive realm of manufacturing luxury sports motorcycles, which are usually dominated by European makers. Walter Rarick, an engineer from Gurney, Illinois, a technical specialist at Volkswagen, involved in motorcycle design since the 90s. He founded his eponymous motorcycle company Royer, which in his vision should sound like roar. His initial project involved creating a two-stroke sport bike with a unique 500 cubic centimeter twin that would introduce a revolutionary direct injection system. Meanwhile, a superbike project with a Harley-Davidson V-Road engine brewed in his mind to be presented to sport bike fans who were monitoring the growing market of exotic motorcycles in the late 90s. Rarick first made a name for himself in the motorcycle scene when he combined two YZ 250 cylinders with a common crankcase and obtained a two-stroke engine with 115 horsepower. The RV 500 motorcycle, weighing 140 kilograms, was introduced in the mid-90s and gained recognition, but never reached full power potential due to stricter emission standards, and the company facing difficulties in implementing the proposed direct injection system. The next project that emerged from Rarick's engineering underground around 2004 was the four-stroke successor to the 500 model. The RV 1000 had an 8-valve V-twin engine with a displacement of 936 cubic centimeters and liquid cooling. The engine was introduced by the Swedish manufacturer Highland. Lightweight was the goal and the main reason for choosing the Highland unit. The dry weight was supposed to be around 150 kilograms, with 120 horsepower. Not bad, but not enough to attract investors. Then in 2007, Walter announced his plans to build a limited production superbike based on the Revolution engine from Harley-Davidson, despite it weighing significantly more than the RV 1000 prototype and having roughly the same power. This concept ignited some interest in the media. The V-Roar 1130 was greeted with enthusiasm, but the occurrences of 2008 sparked a conspiracy against the recently emerging project. More on that at a later time. Back in 2007, reputable motorcycle publications were writing about a new American superbike that was supposed to steal the crown from Buell. Similar motorcycles with Harley engines. The V-Royer resembled a blend of all exotic motorcycles of that time. Some parts of Ducati MV Agusta in bodywork, frame is similar to Bimota frames from the 90s. And a side-mounted radiator straight from the Honda RC51. What's more, it was supposed to house a powerful and relatively modern Harley-Veyroth engine. This provided Walter with additional authority, as Eric Buell was still utilizing outdated Sportster engines with air cooling in his XB lineup of motorcycles. The Royer 1130 looked like a winner. American origin, Italian style, and most importantly, the element of public desire. All of this helped propel Royer to the forefront in motorcycle media, where the project received disproportionately many positive reviews, considering how essentially straightforward it was. In summary, the engine was highly advanced for its time. It was developed by Porsche, and it had potential for significant modifications. In the 1130 cubic centimeters version, Walter kept the engine stock and planned to build 50 motorcycles in 2008 at an attractive, in quotes, price of $39,995. Although deemed acceptable due to high-quality components and hand assembly, it's unlikely to be profitable. For this price in 2008, you could buy a Ducati 1098R or a Bimota DB7. The motorcycle, powered by a cruiser engine, could not withstand such fierce competition. The engine is in a steel frame with 2 longitudinal beams and 2 side plates made of aluminum blanks. The rear subframe supports were built with carbon fiber, like the body. The fuel tank was placed under the seat, with the fuel filler cap where the passenger seat could have been located. The imitation tank covered the airbox and air intake of a relatively tall V-shaped engine design. The engine control motors were standard from Harley, except for the chain primary drive, instead of the belt drive like on the V-Rod. Honda radiators with side mounts were employed to ensure the maintenance of a narrow frontal profile. The rear shocks and Öhlins, Marcassini wheels responsible for suspension, Brembo Goldline calipers stopped V-Roya. The mixed salad's appearance was complemented by Yamaha R1 exhaust pipes, the headlights were from Buell Firebolt, and the instruments were from Verod. The project had its detractors. The Revolution engine was heavy and underpowered for a sport bike, especially when compared to the then king of the hill Ducati 1098, which boasted 114 horsepower. Weight and lack of power were the precise reasons why Eric Buell decided not to use the Revolution in his motorcycles. Initial reviews were positive. The resulting motorcycle was surprisingly light, considering that the donor engine weighed around 90 kilograms. The handling was good, with a well-designed chassis that matched the Ducati formula. Stability with positive feedback. Some details required enhancement, but taking into account that the testing machine was just a prototype constructed in Eric's free time, the outcomes were remarkable. Power was lacking compared to competitors. 120 horsepower would have been competitive in the late 90s, but by 2007 to 2008, the situation in the sport bike category was much more intense. The 1130 retained the useful, torque-rich V-Rod character, but never had enough power to impress. At the end of 2008, the updated V-Roar was introduced, and a new prototype was presented for consideration. Featuring the same stunning bodywork, but with a new blue-silver color and its own single-sided swing arm design, the 1250 SC used the updated Revolution engine introduced in the V-Road the same year. Otherwise, it was more or less the same machine, but now with a starting price of $49,999. It also developed 169 GP, expressing gratitude for Eric's clever supercharger, which is why we refer to it as the SC. This addressed concerns regarding the power shortage in the 1130 model. The supercharger was a highly compact device with a belt drive that was small in size, allowing it to be installed beneath the false tank. Unlike traditional superchargers, the installation on the 1250 uses a small supercharger with a high compression ratio connected to a bypass system, recirculating compressed air back into the compressor to provide instant response. The supercharger was adjusted to provide boost in proportion to the engine's rotation speed, resulting in the 1250 having an exceptionally linear power delivery without any delays. The Revolution experienced insufficient loads, rendering it ideal for forced induction with minimal modifications due to its well-suited characteristics. The SC retained stock pistons and compression ratio. An intercooler was not needed. The choice of the Revolution engine made sense here. Reviewers highly praised the smooth, wide power band and well-tuned delivery, qualities that were not experienced in any other forced induction engine. It was an impeccable, impressive outcome for a fledgling, at a time when numerous major manufacturers were still grappling with challenges related to throttle response. However, not everything was so good. Despite the impeccable product exceeding expectations, the V-Royer was introduced at the wrong time. Until 2008, the market for expensive and exotic motorcycles thrived, like many other luxury items. As the global economy faltered, demand for pricey handmade toys plummeted in one region, particularly in the USA, where the economy sharply declined. Rarick himself acknowledged financial problems, lack of orders, and numerous cancelled deposits. In 2010, Rarick attempted to revive his brand by introducing a couple of electric sport motorcycles, capitalizing on the green trend prevalent in the motorcycle industry at that time. The Roar e-Supersport and e-Superbike were built on a South Korean Hyosung GT 250 Armada chassis. Considering the additional weight and power of the electric mechanism, both received positive reviews from the press, which had nothing to compare them to. There was virtually no competition, but there was also no demand. Electric motorcycles were not the attractive, enticing exotic like the V-Rover. They were evidently based on the Huson with an unsightly fairing. The Electric project was a commendable attempt to revive interest in the Royer brand, but unfortunately, it was too little and too late to make a significant impact. Royer Motorcycles closed in 2012, and very little is known about Walter Rerich, neither about his plans nor his hopes for the future. It is unclear how many motorcycles and which models have been produced in recent years. Rerich hoped to build 50 units of each V-Royer, but it seems that only a small number were completed, including the 1250 SC, which was recently listed for sale and auctioned on eBay. It's always painful to see how the personal dreams of smart enthusiasts crumble, but Royer was introduced at an inappropriate time during a market downturn and faced harsh criticism despite positive reviews. During the 70s, you, a wealthy British aristocrat, no less than a lord and a baron, have a strong passion for motorsport. Using your own money, with the clear intention to have fun, you establish your own racing company. Along the way, you showcase wealth and extravagance on the track, such as helicopter flights, Rolls-Royce cars, and five-star hotels long before extravagance became the norm in Formula One. In a few years, this whole party will come to an end and you will start looking for a new hobby. How would you continue a racing career like this? Of course, by establishing your own motorcycle manufacturing company to give a boost to the declining British motorcycle industry. When it comes to unique motorcycles, few can compare to the quirky history and aristocratic flair of the British Heskett, a company that has taken on several interesting transformations over the past 30 years while producing the same motorcycle since 1982. In the 1980s, the British motorcycle industry was virtually non-existent. It was a lifeless body, persisting long after it should have been relegated to obscurity. Royal Enfield, BSA, and Velocity ceased to exist in the early 70s. Norton disappeared with Norton Willys Triumph in 1978. Triumph still maintained its existence within the Meriden Motorcycle Cooperative, continuing to produce outdated models that were sold to nostalgic buyers who willingly turned a blind eye to the evident poor quality control implemented by the company. Heskett entered the market with the intention of reviving the dying British motorcycle industry. Lord Alexander Fermar Heskett, the third Baron Heskett, fresh off his Formula One campaign, aimed to introduce a high-quality product that would put Britain back on the map for motorcycle manufacturing. Since the middle of the 1970s, he visualized this task in the form of a custom-made, superbly crafted, fully modern machine that would disrupt the dull British industry. Heskett, according to the company, was meant to be the successor to the acclaimed lineup of fast, superbly built British Vincent motorcycles. Or, as some put it, to become the two-wheeled Rolls-Royce. That would truly be a gentleman's bike. In the year 1980, a highly promising new motorcycle was developed. The new bike showcased a 90-degree V-twin engine with a displacement of 992 cubic centimeters, air cooling, and a modern design meticulously created by British engine specialists hailing from Westlake. It was advertised as the first British with dual overhead camshafts and 4 valves per cylinder. For perspective, the closest competitor in specs would have been the 82 Triumph T140. Generated a total of 82 horsepower. These are quite decent numbers for a substantial push during the early 1980s. Fuel was supplied by Delorto carburetors, ignition spark from an electronic ignition system. The frame was a duplex structure made of steel tubes with the power unit serving as a stressed member. Marzocchi suspension was used at both ends, complemented by Brembo brakes. The appearance was understated yet modern. The initial generation was distinctive in that it had a group of stamped wheels. Instead of casting or forging, the wheels are composed of a rim connected to stamped metal spokes. Pay attention to the row of rivets. On paper and in photos, everything looked good. For that era, it was a beautiful with good technical specifications. He was definitely much more modern than anything that had been produced in Britain up to that point in time. Road tests showed that he was quite powerful and smooth. Production started in Daventry in 1982 at a cutting-edge facility, where state-of-the-art CNC milling machines and a computer-controlled quality control system were utilized for the manufacturing process. However, there were a few problems. Despite having good power, the performance was not sufficient. Mainly due to its heavy weight of 244 kilograms, periodic reviews were favorable but overall lukewarm, describing the V1000 as a stable bike with sufficient power and good brakes, but overall quite heavy. The company brochure was filled with polite but weak praises from the initial reviews. Soon after its market debut, issues arose with the gearbox, U-shifting, and poor cooling of the rear cylinder. Furthermore, the company operated on borrowed funds. Lord Heskett failed to secure necessary investments for the project during this time. Instead of having sufficient external investments, he independently established and financed the company, which resulted in a financial collapse of the operation. Heskett went bankrupt in 1982 after making just 139 motorcycles. However, that wasn't the end of Heskett Motorcycles. In 1983, Lord Heskett relaunched the brand and introduced a new model, the Vampire, a fully fared V1000 sport touring motorcycle. Only 40 were built. The ugly style, mediocre reviews, and constant reliability issues led to Heskett meeting its demise for the second time in '84. Wait, that is not all yet. Mick Brum, one of the testers in the Heskett development team, demonstrated genuine interest in preserving the brand. Brum Development Engineering Company provided repair services to existing Heskett owners. They also began making the V1000 in small amounts in eastern Neston, producing about 12 annually from 1984. Since 2011, Brum and a small group of assistants have been quietly maintaining Heskett, manufacturing handcrafted motorcycles for numerous years. Over the years, Brum's team has developed several versions, the main one being the updated V1000, in which many shortcomings of the original machine were eliminated. They were named EN10, which stands for Eastern Neston 10, where 10 represents modifications. Significant changes were made to the chassis in 1997 to create the V1000 Vartan. The sport motorcycle without plastic reached the prototype stage, but it was ultimately never put into production because of its limited appeal and lack of investment interest. In 2011, the brand passed into the hands of entrepreneur Paul Sleiman, who revived the brand by releasing a new limited edition. Recently, the company attracted attention again after launching a new website and releasing some images of the updated V1000. They also have a Twitter feed containing company updates and production information. The new Heskett is currently available for approximately £12,000 sterling without options, which is in fact slightly lower than the previous generations that were provided by Broom Engineering. These machines represent an updated limited series of motorcycles known as Kingswood 1000. The motorcycle is still recognizable as the original V1000 with updated details, including all modifications in both the N10, alongside chassis modifications in models like Vulcan, and many other detail changes aimed at enhancing the reliability and convenience of motorcycle use. The ongoing production of Heskett motorcycles speaks to the quirky nature of motorcycle enthusiasts. Here is an ill-conceived and poorly managed project that made many promises but ultimately failed, never truly disappearing. Production continued despite numerous brand deaths. Today, Heskett remains a tiny brand with loyal followers, like traditional British manufacturers. The chances of Heskett rising and taking the world by storm are already high, but that's not the point. They manufacture premium, one-of-a-kind machines for their limited group of loyal enthusiasts who desire a distinctive, uncommon, and authentic illustration of British noble motorcycle artistry.